Welcome to another episode of Chatting. Well, it's not really Chatting with Nuts, but it is a Friday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A bi-weekly appearance by me, Jimmy Nuts, which means it's the Fantasy Network, and it's time for something we haven't done in about 2 years, which is a tier ranking. We need an air horn, I think. Here's your air horn soundboard. We're doing it. We're going to look back. I kind of feel like I'm stuck a little bit in last year. Kind of feels as if I'm the guy wearing the Letterman's jacket to the new high school games. It's a little cringe, but I'm still doing it. It is the 17th of January as of recording this, and we're going to go through everything in 2024. 67 books, 2 books off being legendary. Unfortunately, the year just turned out to not be that legendary, unfortunately. But we're going to rank everything. Let's get in the chat. We'll kind of warm up a little bit, maybe a little 5-minute intro, talk to some of the usual suspects here in chat, kind of go over what this is going to be. 67 books. If I spend a minute on all of them, it'll be 67 minutes. We know I can't do that because I'm me. So we're going to see how long this goes. I'm going to try to not to keep it too long. However, I also do not want to rank inside of the rankings. So this time, unlike 2022, I just didn't do this last year. I was just like, I'm not doing it. This year, whatever rank it goes into in the tier is irrelevant. It's just about the tiers. Shout out to my boy Lucas. Lucas did a tier ranking video, and he was like, you know what? I'm not going to rank them inside the tiers because that defeats the purpose of a tier list. And I'm like, that kind of makes sense because it's really just about what tier it lands in. I'm not ranking 67 through 1. It's not going to happen. And also, it takes a ridiculous amount of time, an outrageous amount of time that frankly, I'm sure you don't want to see me sit here and like scrutinize over what is like high B and low A. I'm sure. So good to see everybody. Oh, Murphy Napier Books is in the chat. Good to see you. As always, my good friend. Anitha says, stop copying Alan Jimmy. Oh, because I was late starting the stream. I got you. Murphy says, Jimmy, you owe us a jingle for every minute you're late. Do you want to build a snowman? Does that count? I don't know. Anita says, I was so confused for a minute. I saw Murphy's message and then it wasn't there, though I hallucinated. But don't worry about it at all. The Beezney says, if these tier lists are named after Gurm, fave to least fave feet picks, I'm unsubbing. I did not get very creative. I went D through S and just changed the colors. Here's the thing. I love custom tier lists. And for example, I absolutely adored StoryTube, good friend of the channel. They did one where they named them after pubs. But, I'm sure if I asked them, hey, how did you feel about having to explain the pub every time someone new came in? They'd probably be like, yeah, that got a little long. That got a little taxing, possibly. Though I got it because, I've been to Ireland. So I understood the pub names. But, I wanted to do maybe some sort of lifting one, or I thought about maybe doing it as belt ranks in jiu-jitsu. But then I was like, you know what? How about I just do S through D because I'm not fun at all. Also, to be honest with you folks, not a great week for the Friday Night Delight. Not the best week. It was a bunch of bullshit. But we're here now to talk about books, which is the more fun thing. But I wanted to do maybe a little bit more than I actually have here tonight. But unfortunately, I just ran out of energy. So here I am. Jared said, if Jimmy isn't here in 15 minutes, I think Alan gets to take over the stream. So I guess all of this was just going on as I was preparing and psyching myself up, slapping my chest, flexing in the mirror. There's Lucas, who I mentioned earlier, said tier list Pog, Red Light, Friday Night Delight. Glad to be here. Good to see you, Molly. There's no quadruple F- tier. That's where Wind and Truth belongs. Ryan bringing the balanced commentary as always. Love to see it. Have you read Lapvona in 24? That felt like 2 years ago, didn't it? I agree. When I saw Book of the New Sun on here, I was like, ooh, yikes. How do I make this work? What are those tier names? Literally the default. Get with the times, Anita. Jared said, I got my work done early just so I can make it to the stream. Jared, I appreciate you being here, friend. Thank you. I very, very much appreciate it. Anita says, where's the creativity? And I'm saying, I'm not sure, but I'm going to figure out where the ban button is if you keep talking in the chat like this. Just kidding. Mrs. Nuts, do not ban Anita. My streaming software is not the most cash money when it comes to dealing with screen sharing. So it's a little ass, to be honest with you, but we're going to make it work tonight. Logan, good to see you in the chat. I haven't seen you in a while, man. Good to see you. Good to see you. So cultured. The Heart Part 6 by Drake to Not Like Us. That would actually been really good. StoryTube chiming in said, yeah, made the tier list last 4 hours. It wasn't that. I think it was you, Carlos. I know Yolanda. It wasn't Yolanda's fault ever. Great to see people here. I hope you guys are having a good week. I hope that it's been good to you. Not been the best here, but we persevere and we move on or whatever. David Goggins says, the Library of Alexandria says, sick as a dog, Jimmy, but dropping in to say hi before going back to my blankets. I hope you feel better, buddy. I'm not even going to pick on you. I just hope you feel better, man. Yeah. So, thank you, Andre. Said, looking swole, hitting us with the mouse arm tricep flex. No, but thank you. I appreciate it. Jimmy with the band threats. Woo, feeling spicy. We're going to have fun. I remember last time I did this, I was like 5 minutes into tier ranking in 2022, and I immediately realized I had made a mistake. And I was like, this is going to take one, forever. And two, I'm very stressed out by this. And one of the reasons is because people were like, how is this book over this one in the A tier? And I realized that people were worried about the order. So that's why this time I'm going to be a little bit more relaxed. I just kind of want to go over the year, go over the books I liked, didn't like, whatever. But it's not going to be like super strict. We're going to have fun. I would love to hear people that are in the chat, like, just what you think of the books. Please do not be super inflammatory. We're chilling. We're having a good time tonight. And for me, this is just kind of to hang out with all of y'all and talk about some books. So Alan says, Jared's checkmark just spiked my fever. Fantastic. Harry Dresden, notable pervert in the chat, making soup and watching Jimmy Nuts a great night. Just kidding. Whoever's behind the account, you're not the, I'm speaking of the character. This is kayfabe, whatever. What kind of soup do you have? Very curious. Very, very curious. Mitch says, Alan always sick lately, got that Augustus immune system. I feel like I haven't had Alan on the channel since like October. Maybe we need to, remedy that soon. And we are definitely going to have some changes coming to Chatting with Nuts in this format in the future. I just haven't had the wherewithal and the time lately or energy to finalize some of those things. So instead, you're getting a tier list tonight. Andre said, YouTube notifications has failed me once again. Hate to see it. Jared said, it's S tier, Wolf Hall. I'm still making my way through it very slowly. That and Solenoid. So we're going to get started, but I also wanted to say, how long did I go? Only 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes. That's not bad. That's not bad. There's predictions going in the chat. Dungeon Crawler Car is going to be surprised S tier. Maybe I will just absolutely make up all my rankings and just mess with everyone. Marg Hoagie says, my wife left me. I needed this, Jimmy. If that is true, I am so sorry. And if it's not, good one. But if it is true, I hope that you, I don't know. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad to give you something to do on a Friday night. There's definitely more destructive things you could be doing on a Friday night. So she'll be back after the weekend, but still, this is probably Notorious Mitch, if I had to guess, but we'll see. We'll see if it was. So I'm not gonna be able to keep up with every single chat tonight. There's a lot of people in the chat, which I always appreciate. But I want to get this show on the road. I want to put some kind of disclaimers out there. So one, I'm going to rank some books. I'm going to tell you what I liked, what I didn't like. You're going to disagree with me at some points, and I need you to know that I am nothing but a jackass who just happened to buy a way too expensive DSLR lens combo kit with the Rodecaster Pro 2 and a fancy microphone. And that's the only difference. That's it. I'm an idiot. And I bought stupid cool equipment to talk about books, but I have absolutely no authority. Your opinion is most likely just as valid as mine. And I'm an idiot. So don't take it personally. It's all good. I claim no objectivity. I am not an authority. I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. I'm just giving you guys my experience. I want to get that out of the way first because I know tier rankings generally, can bring discussion and maybe some disagreements, but I just want you to know that I do not see myself as an authority in any shape or form. I honestly don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, so let's do this. I've never used a burner for Jimmy's streams. Well, you should, to be honest with you. I see people reacting. Lucas said his wife did leave him. She's with me. Brutal. Kind of an interesting way of getting new subscribers, Lucas. All right, let's start out. I know these are really small, folks, but it just is what it is. So the first one is the Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut. This is my first time ever getting Kurt Vonnegut. By the way, I'm not going to go super in depth on these books. I'm not going to, like, if you want to see nuanced stuff, you can go check out the wrap ups, the reading vlogs, the year-end awards, and all that stuff. I'm kind of going to move through this. Breakfast of Champion by Kurt Vonnegut. I was very, very happy with this book. I really enjoyed it. There were definitely some things in it that were a little shocking, I guess. I didn't know that Kurt Vonnegut was on that list where, like, he wrote about things in his time period that were, like, insane. Like, there's an entire chapter just on genital size, and it wasn't great. Like, I didn't, like, and I can laugh at tons of different things. I mean, I think, you know, I'm open to all types of humor or whatever and different strategies, but I wasn't thrilled reading that chapter. I just thought it was absolutely insane. And, you know, just some, I don't know, there was some anger behind the humor, which I really, really liked. And I do think Vonnegut actually ended up making some pretty compelling points. Not about genital size, by the way. Like, this is outside of that. But his writing, really, really interesting. I end up reading House for Monkey or whatever his, he has a short story collection that Talking Story told me I should check out. And I've actually been making my way through. I haven't read it in quite a while, but I was very impressed with, like, the short snippets. Sci-fi based, a lot of them, not like space opera, but like speculative fiction or whatever. Vonnegut was pretty cool, but it wasn't a book that I was like super duper over the moon with. And I've heard that he has other ones that are even better. So this is like somewhere, like, I'm trying to decide right now, maybe like B or C tier. And I kind of want to be a little bit more brutal. I might come back to this one. I might readjust some things at the end. I'm not ranking them inside the tiers, but things may switch tiers after I look at where I put what where. So I'm going to put Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions in C tier with the acknowledgement that I actually really, really like Vonnegut's writing, and I'm more excited to read like Slaughterhouse-Five and some other stuff. I think that would be great. Rick Thunder is here, ladies and gentlemen. I've also never used a runner for Jimmy Streams. Famous co-host of the BellTube channel, and that's a fact, Jack. That is pretty incredible. B says, the energy in the stream right now is exactly what I was looking for. Well, I'm glad to hear that. What's up, Kendalls and Kicks? Good to see you. Harry Dresden says, Vonnegut has such a strange but captivating prose. I would agree. I think his writing is really, really captivating. That's a great way to put it. And I will say this. So far, the Monkey House collection I'm reading, I actually think it's better than Breakfast of Champions thus far. But I also really like a lot of short stories. And no, Mitch, C's tier does not equal 2 stars. This is not star adjacent at all. So Carl Zimmerman says, you got to read Slaughterhouse-Five, Jimmy. I definitely will. I actually bought a bunch of Vonnegut after reading Breakfast of Champions. So that should kind of give you an idea of how much, you know, just for that, maybe I'll bump it up to B. We'll see. So the next one is Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro, the guy who I've talked about way too much now at the end of 2024, mainly because he's just been awesome for me. Very psychological read. His debut, I think that it doesn't end up having the staying power, maybe as something like Remains of the Day, but I don't know how many books I've read that really do. But man, is there some really good stuff in here, and a book that really changes once you finish it and you think back about what is actually happening in the book. Tough to read at some points, and actually leans into horror, which, and I'm not talking about like vampire stuff, but just like eeriness, oddness, unsettling. Maybe that would be the word I would use. And it's all about a mother and her daughter in post-World War II Japan. And this is a country that is dealing with its identity as a woman is also dealing with her identity as a mother or not as a mother, which is really interesting. So I'm going to put this in A tier. And I think this could be S tier, but I'm trying to be just slightly more conservative as we go through these. So next one is Ian Banks' Use of Weapons, book 3 in the Culture series. And this is a series where order doesn't matter as much as other series, but Ian M. Banks is probably one of the most underrepresented authors on my channel for how much I have enjoyed the 2 books that I've read by him, first being Player of the Games, and then use of weapons, which really goes into a very odd narrative structure where you kind of work backwards through time. And it is very hard to get your footing in, I guess I would say. And I see a lot of people bounce off of this book, but it really worked for me once I got into it. And I think Ian M. Banks is just like one of those authors where when I think about my experience with him, I'm like, why am I not reading him right now? I bought Accession the day after I finished this, and I plan to read that. It's book 4. And if you're wondering where to start with Ian M. Banks, I've heard a lot of people say use of weapons, but I actually think Player of Games would be a great place to start. The first book, Consider Phoebus, I think is Phoebus. I can't remember, but it is not like the best book he's written. So a lot of people would rather see you read something else. And for those who are publication order only, I get it. I am too, but this is just not one of those series that you have to worry about that kind of continuity. So I think that it's actually totally fine. I would give Use of Weapons the A tier. And again, probably if there wasn't a couple other heavy hitters, I'm really trying to reserve S for like all time. Basically, if you're an S tier, you're like an all-time favorite, right? I don't know how many books are on my all-time favorite list. I don't have a top 10 or top 25 in mind. Maybe it's top 50. I don't know, but I do know books that I find to be super duper important, and also books that I just like cannot stop talking about or thinking about. So S tier is going to be reserved for like literally the best of the best. I hope I don't have too many in S, or maybe I'd feel like I'm being just slightly too lenient, possibly. Pale View of Hills was the Ishiguro book, Anitha. I see you asking that in the chat. Molly said Slaughterhouse 5 was really good, but I feel like I missed half of it while doing the audio. Might have to reread it. Yeah, I find his reading really fun to read off the page. Very much. The books being talked about, hiding behind Jimmy, is throwing me off. Yeah, unfortunately, this is just an evil that I have to deal with because of the way the software works, but I'm going to try to pull the book. I might pull every book in the D tier and then adjust them from there so you can at least see them. But I understand how that could be a little bit jarring. But just listen to my words in this far too expensive of an audio setup. Tanner said, I thought Ishiguro would only exist in the S tier. And Jared said, Player of Games is right. Or I'm right. Thank you. Thank you. S tier exists solely for Tad Williams. Can you be in the top right, Jimmy? You know what? What if I pull myself over here? How do we feel about that? Okay, I will pull myself up here. Hopefully I didn't mess anything up. Let me know if that looks good. Thank you. Looking at the books to be sorted, I think I've only read one book Jimmy read last year. That kind of makes me happy. Everything's dear to you, confirmed. Very cool. Let me know if you're okay with me being up here. And thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it. It's not always the easiest to change things on the fly, but that didn't seem like it was too bad. Let me make sure that that's good. Okay, cool. Cool. Listen to my voice. I see you, Jimbo. Much better. Cool. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. So the next one here is Murakami. I believe this is a hard-boiled eggs and salad or something. End of the world. I can't remember. This is my favorite Murakami book. This is the one that I probably was the most interested in narrative-wise, and probably had the least amount of like weird Murakami stuff in it. I thought that this premise was awesome. You know, there's some unicorns, pretty sick. There's two different timelines going on, but there's also a population inside of like a walled city, kind of like being kept in. And it's also like a weird situation of why they're there, at least why this one person is there, which I thought was really sick. If you guys know me, you know, I like stories about like controlled or like, encapsulated populations with the mystery of why is this happening, which I think is pretty great. So I would say this is just a solid B tier book. And I really like Murakami's writing. There's things that I don't love about Murakami, which I mean, like literally you know what it is. Like everybody knows that his women's stuff can be a little odd, but I would say that I very, 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 very much like this book. And I started 1Q84 and I have a feeling I paused it. It wasn't a DNF. I just kind of fell out of it. But I have a feeling that will end up being my favorite Murakami because there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. So Brady says, keep bouncing around like the old DVD logo thing. I know exactly what you mean. I love that so much. Marty Hot Dog said, read a bunch of Murakami, but was long enough ago. They all just blend together as whiskey and uncomfortable portrayals of women. Yeah, I could see how you could take that away from that. I do think Murakami is doing some pretty interesting things, and sometimes his intent gets a little bit lost in the sauce. But I very much do like him. Jared said, my only problem with Murakami is that its women are too well written and have rich interior lives. Somebody cancel this, man. My God. Yeah, there's a lot of love for 1Q84. I was really loving it. It wasn't anything to do with the book that I ended up putting it down. It was more so like I had things to read, and it's a pretty long book. And I bought the trilogy, so like the trilogy set. So I had like read one, and then I was halfway through two, and I'm like, oh, I have another one to go. I can pause this one. But in reality, it's just one big, right? Seth Pluto says 1Q84 is great, minus one scene. Yeah. So I like Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, whatever it's called, which is cool. I thought it was great. So the only nonfiction book that I completed this year is The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass and S tier. Narrative of Life of Frederick Douglass is, I believe, free on Audible. It's like 90 pages to 100 pages. And Frederick Douglass, for those who do not know, was in Maryland, and he was enslaved and then found his freedom and then went on just an absolute mission to be maybe the greatest person ever. I mean, he like did so many things that were so important, not just for abolishing slavery, but then also going over to Ireland. And I mean, really just like a remarkable human being. And one of the things that I found so striking about this nonfiction book written forever ago was just how beautiful he was able to state everything that happened to him. And maybe beautiful is a wrong word because of how just very heavy the topic is, but he is a fabulous writer. I mean, a fabulous writer. And I think if you're American, or even if you're not, I think this is like well worth your time. I literally think he's like one of the best. I mean, he'd be my pick probably for best American ever, but also just like best human being. And like his journey to like learning how to read and write and talking to young white kids at the dock and like exchanging, whatever he had for them to teach him certain words or whatever it was. It's just beautiful. And the way that he is able to portray slavery, I think, is the most impactful thing you could ever read. Jared Henderson, who's in the chat, he came on and he had talked about it with me. And the point he had brought home was he was talking about, in the book, Frederick Douglass is talking about how he actually ended up with a new slave owner who had been very, very good to him at some points. And he thought that he was moving over to someone who would treat him right. And it turns out that the social pressure on this woman, who had been a great person for all intents and purposes, there was a pressure that she was treating her slaves too well, and then she ended up actually being worse than the previous slave owner, who was terrible. And Frederick Douglass takes a moment in the book to say, this is how awful the institution of slavery is, that it could ruin a woman, like a great woman, a godly woman. Like, that's powerful. I don't know. And whenever Jared shared that, I knew I had to read it. And even me telling you will not prepare you for the words from the man that experienced these things. And obviously very heavy, but it's like 90 to 100 pages. And I think you owe it to yourself, especially if you're living in America, to read this, because there have been very few people as impactful and as legendary as Frederick Douglass, with the perseverance that honestly is astounding to me. So I know this is the Fantasy Network, the Fiction Network, whatever, but I got to say that I think this nonfiction book was pretty fantastic. Rebecca Nicole says, your only nonfiction of the year is S tier. Will this become a nonfiction channel now? It will, in fact, not. This was very much a kind of, not a one-off. I'll read nonfiction every now and then, but this was one that I just really felt like I needed to read. And, it's an important book in my opinion. So I hope you guys will check it out for sure. Oh, Anita says, I remember you read this at the beginning of your friendship with Jared after CWN episode. Yeah, absolutely. Pretty fantastic. Molly said, I actually learned about the narrative of life of Frederick Douglass in college. It was actually part of the whole genre and similar text at the time. Very cool. Very, very cool. The guy is just amazing, amazing writer. Zan said, I love you very much, Jamie. I'm going to tell you right now, if you talk so much about all these books, you're going to be here until 3 a.m. S tier is probably going to get a little bit more chatter, to be fair. And Jared is reaffirming this. He says, read it. It's essential. And he's just a great orator and stylist. Yeah. Unbelievable, especially considering the fact that like he had every reason not to be able to read and write. And he was. So, man, I feel like we're just going back to back bangers here. The Book Thief by Mark Zuzak, S tier. This book is fantastic. It is I think it's the highest rated book on Goodreads as a historical fiction. It's about a girl in World War II Germany. You can imagine what's going on. And it's about a place in time in a neighborhood in a street that is being wrapped up in this big global thing, but is also still its own little personal entity. And obviously, huge tragedy. Humanity is inspected, and the narrator himself is death. And he fears us as humans. And I think that is a pretty powerful message to send. And I thought this book was just absolutely phenomenal. I thought it was so great. Some people label it as a YA book because it gets read in schools a lot. I think it's meaningless. I think the writing style is actually amazing. The narrative being told from death and that perspective is so strong and so important to the story. I just thought that the styling of it all was amazing. And it's, I think this year I read more books that I would label important. I've said this before. There's probably only maybe a handful of books, maybe 10 books ever that I've read that I would consider important outside of the context of myself and my enjoyment. Like there's been books that are important to me. You know what I mean? But important as a whole. And I think Book Thief is probably somewhere in that category. So absolutely going to give the Book Thief the S tier. These are all randomized, so I didn't expect there to be 2 S tiers, but it is what it is. Go check it out, but beware, it is very, very sad. So Robin Hobbs, Shaman's Crossing, the Soldier's Son series, which is much more hated on than Realm of the Elderlings, but I thought it was pretty good. I've heard Forest Mage Book 2 is much better, but this book is like setting up a world. I did not find the protagonist to be the most engaging, but he was nowhere near as bad as a lot of what other people had said to me. But I really did think that it was a solid book. I never felt the urge to read Forest Mage outside of the fact that I've had so many people tell me it's like, not only it's the best in this trilogy, but it's actually one of the best Robin Hobb books. And I believe those people, and I would like to read it. But I have to judge this by itself, and I'm going to put it in C tier. I think it is really good, but it's not, it's just not something that I've really thought much about since. And there's also just some stuff in there that I didn't find that engaging, to be honest with you. You know, it's fine. Colonialization is inspected, I think, in a pretty interesting way. I think Hobb does a pretty careful job, and the writing's pretty good. I mean, great, really. But it's just like not a story that I've been clamoring to get back to, though I would love to read book 2. Amanda says, reading Shaman's Crossing and then now falling over Forest Mage, Hobbs' best book is crazy work. It's all what I'm here for. It is disappoint. Teacher Jay Reed says, read Frederick Douglass with my students this year, and we had so many great conversations. I hope I did it justice. We can only do our best and hope for the best, right? So a lot of people are saying they read Book Thief in high school, which is actually pretty cool. I think it's perfectly acceptable to read as an adult as well. For those who are saying, I don't read middle grade books, but you can forget about any of those labels. Murphy says, Jimmy juked the stats, or whatever that phrase is. I don't know. Murphy, I don't know. I'm older than you. I'm a boomer in booktube terms, I guess, because I have no idea. Some love for Hobb in the chat. And, to be clear, I know some people are saying C tier is 2 stars. That's really not how I'm looking at this at all. C tier is just like a good book, but like, it's fine. It's fine. B tier is like, oh, I like this book, even though maybe not all of it was for me. A tier is like, I really, really love this book. And then S tier is like, this book is an all-time favorite. And then D tier is like, didn't like it. Is what I would say. Yeah, a lot of people are reiterating the Shaman's Crossing is fine, but Forest Mage is the way to go. And I totally believe that. I totally believe that. Charmezy says, good to see Charmaine, by the way, said, I like the Soldier Son trilogy, weird but good. Yeah, there's nothing about it to where I'm like, man, this is probably not going to be a good trilogy. Like, I bet you it's better than most of the fantasy I would read. It was just okay. I was kind of expecting to get I want to be a hipster and be like, this is the best Hobb book, but unfortunately it just didn't happen. So Jared said, I think of Jimmy as the kindly and garrulous grandfather of fantasy booktube. That's a PhD word, Jared. I can't pronounce that. I'm way too dumb. So Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Another one so soon. This is A tier. And Never Let Me Go is, I think, his most notable book. Turned into a movie. People love it or hate it. I don't honestly really care. I thought it was really great, but I did think that this book was probably in line with Pale View of Hills. This is probably tied with that as like third or fourth. I've read 4 Ishiguro books. This is probably like my third or fourth favorite of him. I think he just does a lot of interesting things in Claire and the Sun Remains of the Day that has yet to be topped for me from his works. But Never Let Me Go is a great piece of, in my opinion, speculative fiction. I mean, there's a twist that everyone talks about. I think it's fine. I don't think that the twist is going to like turn the book around for anybody, but I'm not going to ruin it for you. And do not ruin it in chat, please. Please. But I did think that Ishiguro had a way of like talking about almost like a coming of age in a really weird situation, but then being able to show how humans react to knowing their mortality. And you can say, well, we all know we're going to die one day, but like how often do the average person, I'm talking about people who like me, who are like obsessed with the idea of death and mortality, but like, your general person probably isn't thinking about mortality every single second of the day. But if you had an idea of how it would end or why it would end, I think you would think about it a lot more. And I just love the way Ishiguro is able to kind of like go into it a little bit more without having to, stretch a normal character. It's hard to say it without like spoiling anything. It's really good. And I think what he is getting at is the idea of mortality and the acceptance of it and the acknowledgement of it and our place in the existence of things and why are we human? And this is something he does with all of his work. So Never Let Me Go. Definitely his most hyped work. Like everyone always talks about it. I think that it's just so much better. I think Remains of the Day is just so much better than that. But I still love this book. I think, it's a 5-star book for me, but I also just love Ishiguro and his approach to storytelling quite a bit. The things he leaves unsaid are so compelling, which is a weird way of describing it. Rebecca Nicole says, if Jimmy's a boomer grandfather, I must be ancient. Maybe. A lot of people like Never Let Me Go. I know there's a good amount of people in my Discord that don't like it. Let's see. Jimmy is that uncle that you thought you knew, and then one day you find yourself saying, what do you mean you were a professional wrestler? Aslan, that's pretty funny. That's pretty good. Samokidu said, damn, read some baller books. Black Leper, Red Wolf, Born, The Changeling, My Dark Vanessa. We'll see where they land, but yeah, it was a pretty good one. Meowcat said, Never Let Me Go, not S tier, unsubbing. Fair. Totally fair. I'll be reading Remains of the Day in the Pale View of Hills this year. I envy you. I wish I could read them for the first time again. But honestly, they're even better on a reread, I would imagine. So Octavia E. Butler last year in 2023 absolutely cleaned house at the Nutty Book End of the Year Book Awards. And that was with Kindred, which is one of the rare books I said that I felt like was just super important. I really loved a lot about that book. And what it had to say about, just incredible grace and compassion. Parable of the Sower, I was most excited for out of her catalog because of the post-apocalyptic nature of it. That's just like my favorite genre of story. It just is what it is. And I've been reading a lot more of them recently. So she had to compare to quite a few different post-apocalyptic works, but also compare to Kindred. And I really enjoyed this book, but there was so much in the back half that I didn't enjoy as much as in the first half. And I think that there are definitely like fair criticisms of this book. However, if your complaint is that she didn't like actually predict the future or something, I just could not care any less about that piece of it. But for instance, I think I read it with Rebecca Nicole, who had a lot more negatives than I did, and she did a video. So if you want to see a more critical review of this book, I would definitely recommend going check out her video. But for me, it was not the most remarkable post-apocalyptic book I had read. And there was a couple things in it that were not my favorite. So I ended up putting this one here into B tier. Solid book, not my favorite. Certainly nowhere near Kindred for me. And I just don't know if she'll ever have a book. I'm going to read her entire catalog. I don't know if I'll ever read a book from her that's going to top Kindred. It's going to be really hard to do. So Post-apocalyptic is what we're going to stick with. We're going to go The Long Tomorrow by Lee Brackett, who worked on The Empire Strikes Back and is a sci-fi legend that is not really as well known today. This is about two boys who are in like an Amish type society. Technology is the devil. The world doesn't have these things anymore, except that there's something out there. And they go on a search for it. And it is a book about coming of age, but it's also a book about religion, and it's also a book about beliefs, and maybe even possibly a little bit of censorship. And I had a blast with this, and I thought that this book was really good. I think as I've sat on it longer, it has not dwindled or anything like that, but I wonder how much of it was it being unknown to me that it would be surprising. Like, how much did it take me by surprise? Like, exceeding expectations is a huge part of like a reaction to a book, right? Or not meeting expectations that you have for it. And I kind of talked about this a lot when I talked about When in Truth in my last wrap-up stream. So I'm going to put this in B tier. I may bump it to A tier. We will see. But I did think that it was a really solid book. Also very, very short. Very, very short. Zan says, Parable definitely works as a standalone or a duology. I'm sure she could have done something great. It doesn't need more. I will absolutely do the sequel. I've heard it's better. So, Jake Bishop said, my criticism is of the people who told me to read it on the basis that it predicts the future. I don't blame the book for not predicting the future. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, people are wrong all the time, right? Vest says, a fart-smelling tier list. I see. You came to the right place. If you want to get a whiff of your own brand, there's no better place than the Fantasy Network. All right. And Guy Gavriel K. Sailing to Sarantium. I'm just going to take both of these bad boys and throw these into the A tier. Guy Gavriel K. does it again. I've actually recently seen some people who bounced off of this duology, and I thought that they had some pretty compelling points. But for me, just the capturing of a man in grief after losing his loved one and then going on, basically a journey and being forced to move on was just a really compelling read for me. But also the way that he was able to use culture to express the feeling of the place and time that he was inspecting. Obviously, in his historical fantasy, he's always inspired by other things that have actually happened in the real world, and then he kind of tweaks them or whatever. So this is extremely low fantasy, but I thought that all of the actual fantasy elements, which are very light, I thought were pretty well done. And I was really, really impressed with Lord of Emperors because he introduced a character in Lord of Emperors, I think pretty early on, that wasn't in the first book that I actually ended up loving, I think maybe the most. And I just really appreciated the journey that I got to go on here. Also, the chariot racing, it's kind of a meme at this point if anybody knows about this, but the chariot racing scenes are some of the most heart-pounding scenes I've read. I thought that they were incredibly written. There was one in Sailing to Sarantium. I was like, that's as good as it gets. And then Lord of Emperors did it again. It was even better. The factions, the politicking, all of it. So awesome. And somehow tied into mosaics. I don't know. I thought it was kind of an enchanting read for many different reasons. This is not my favorite Guy Gavriel K. That still goes for Song for Arbonne. But this is certainly in that top 3 spot. I would just list the duology as a whole as one pretty work. So Guy Gavriel K always ends up pretty high on the tier list or high on the awards list every time I read him, minus Tagana. So his consistency has been pretty damn amazing. Roger Zelazny's The Hand of Oberyn, book 4 in the Chronicles of Amber, the penultimate book in the first arc of Amber. I plan to read book 5 relatively soon. Zelazny's amazing. I think he's awesome. I think he's very easy to read even in today's age. And with each Amber book, he kind of delves into, it's an epic fantasy that is an urban / portal fantasy. But it's also really just a family drama. And this book is all about the relations of a dead father who has left a mess for inheritance and just exactly what everyone feels about that. And there's a lot of backstabbing. There's deaths. There's lies, there's twists, there's turns, and it's all in like 130 pages, which is pretty crazy. But the way Zelazny like plays with other genres inside of his epic fantasy is so good. Like he's just such a talented writer. And I don't agree when people say that his writing feels dated. I actually disagree completely. I think that he brought in a more modern voice at the time and still like holds up today. And Zelazny is George R. R. Martin's favorite author, which is exactly why I started to read it. Read Amber because he reveres it so much. And I've read Lord of Light as well. But Hand of Oberyn had big shoes to fill after book 3, which was my favorite of the bunch. And Hand of Oberyn was good, but I'm going to put it down here with Shaman's Crossing. It was not my favorite of the bunch, probably my least favorite of the Amber books, even though I still enjoyed it. And for 130 pages, not a big investment, but I am invested in the final book because the family drama is like peak. It's like Succession, but in the 60s and in like an LSD-driven fantasy kind of. Maybe LSD-driven fantasy is a little bit of a stretch, but I just assume everyone in the 60s was doing LSD. All right, trying to catch up here on the chat. How we feeling out there? We have Citadel of the Autarch, which is the 4th and final book. Well, technically there's 5 books in Book of the New Sun, but we're just going to stick with it. Final book in the Book of the New Sun with if you don't count Earth of the New Sun. And I really love this. The Book of the New Sun was a wild trip that I didn't get everything on. I would love to reread it. I've actually been getting a little bit of a Gene Wolfe itch, and I'd like to scratch that soon. I have an idea of what I'm going to read, but I'll hold off until I actually do it. I thought it was a fitting conclusion. As much as you can tie up something like this that is so dense and confusing and kind of wonderful in some ways and a bit mesmerizing. This is not my favorite of Book of the New Sun. My favorite actually will be mentioned here in a little bit, not to give you too much of a spoiler. Actually, how about we just grab it now? I think that would probably be a pretty good idea. If I can find it on this list. I can't find it. Oh my God. Did it not upload? All right. Sword of the Lictor has to be in here somewhere. You know what? If we get to it, we'll get to it. I'm not really sure where it is. I don't see it on here. Do you guys see it? Oh, well. All right. Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. This is the first book in a lot of books that Jacqueline Carey's written. This is one that's been recommended to me a lot. There's a ton of parallels to Christianity in the book, but also just other types of religions. And also there's a bunch of Norse stuff in the book that I didn't like at all. But it's told in a first-person perspective, recalling these tales, and is written beautifully. I mean, just as good as it gets as far as writing goes, and has a bit of that Hobbes feel, but if it was more adult, if we're not following around a Fitz, we are following around a child that goes through some horrendous things, like absolutely terrible things. But it's all in the name of this religion that happens to be quite crazy. There's a lot of BDSM elements in here. I don't think that it harbors on them too long, but to say they're not there would be a lie. I love the first half of this book, or really the first part of this book, and I really like the ending, but there is an entire Norse thing that I don't like. I'm so burnt out on Norse. This is a me thing, not Jacqueline Carey's fault, just me. I would like to read the sequels, but I'd be lying to say that I didn't dislike about like 200 pages of the journey as I went on. So I'm going to put this in B tier. The writing is S tier. The potential S tier, but my experience with the book certainly was B tier. I was really looking forward to this. Probably one of the most hyped books the most hype I was to read a book this year was Kushiel's Dart. I was thrilled when it won the Patreon pick of the month back whenever it was, April, I think, maybe July. And I was just ecstatic, and it just did not hit that expectation, but it's still a great book. And plenty of people in my Patreon Discord have been reading it and loving it. So, it's just me. I'm just so tired of Norse stuff, dude. I'm so tired of it. Connor says, Book of the New Sun was my favorite read last year. I don't blame you. There's a ton to dive into. Ton. Acceptable, I guess. A lot of Norse love. Listen, I'm not saying Norse sucks. I'm just saying I'm tired of reading about it. That's all. High Rise by J.G. Ballard. This was another Patreon pick of the month. And Yalk says, Norse? More like snore. Got him. So, High Rise by J.G. Ballard, conceptually, the concept of the whole book of this being like a class system within a skyscraper, the urbanization of society and piling us into these small boxes and all of it's so sick. The book does at some point get a little bit much. And also you have to really like at times it's almost like crazy. I said in my review that there was very little humor in this book. And my Namos, who is the one who picked this book, actually said, I actually laughed at this book a lot. And the more I think about it, the more I could see the humor because it's so over the top. But I think I was in a headspace when I read this book that I was angry about a lot of stuff in the world. And it like just furthered my anger instead of being able to like take a step back and laugh at it. But like for what it is, it's a solid book. I enjoyed it. I want to read more J.G. Ballard. Apparently he's just obsessed with the idea of being stuck in concrete buildings and putting people in like cramped spaces and seeing what happens with humans. It's conceptually amazing. As a book, I thought it was pretty good. So I'm going to put it down here in the C tier, but I really would like to read more J.G. Ballard for sure. Yeah. Oh, Future Sunrise said you should read Crash next, transgressive sci-fi about people who get off on car crashes. Is that who I've become? Is that who I am? Foster by Claire Keegan, short story, very small. Kid goes to live with like a foster family for a bit as her mom is giving birth to like, I don't know, like the 7th or 8th kid. It's a lot of kids. And it is about like almost like found family and that we can find love in other places and tragedy. And it's very, very good. It wasn't my favorite short story of all time, but it definitely got me a wee bit emotional. And I've heard that the movie is fantastic. So I'm going to just put it in a solid B tier short story. Abaddon's Gate, which is book 3 in The Expanse, a series that I love and for some reason never read. Abaddon's Gate was my least favorite of the first 3, but I did not dislike it. I thought it was just pretty good. And I think I would put this in the B tier. Again, these are not in any particular order at all. Now we have Shadows of Self, Book 2 and Mistborn, Era 2. Alloy of Law is a book that I wish I would have been harder on when I read it. Shadows of Self was a step up, but I still thought it was just not good. Western fantasy, Mistborn, magic, all of that sounds so cool. And then I read 3 of the 4 and I just never really had a good time. Never really enjoyed it. Never did anything that I would have liked to see it do. And I truly just don't really like the characters at all. So that's going to go in the D tier, and that is probably the easiest decision I would have to make tonight. Reading with Rebecca Nicole says, did you see that there's a TV show based on High Rise? I have not, but I would love to watch it if it's good. I could see it being really bad. Heroes Die by Matthew Woodring Stover. This is a guy who has written some Star Wars stuff, but also kind of writing a kick-ass 80s action type fantasy with a lot more nuance than that. It's a commentary on violence in our society and how we kind of, show that off on TV and in media. And it's only gotten worse since he's written this. Very cool book, very solid. I've heard that the later books are actually very reminiscent to an R. Scott Baker, where it's like very philosophical and he's asking a lot of really tough questions. And I've heard they're really nothing like first book. So I'm actually way more interested in getting to the sequels than I was in the first book, but I really liked the first book. I thought it was really good. It was a solid entry. So I'm going to put that in the B tier. That's another one, probably that and Kushiel's Dart were the 2 longest standing books on this list as far as like I wanted to read them for such a long time. And they both were solid, right? But they, for what they were hyped as, maybe didn't reach the heights that I would have liked to seen. So Zan said, ready to judge you for this next one. I probably failed you. I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry. A Bitter Draft said, just tuned in, and upon seeing Kushiel's Dart and B, I'm thinking about tuning out. Jimmy, I understand. But you also see my disclaimer at the beginning where I called myself a jackass and that I'm stupid. That should maybe help up a little bit. Julian May, The Many-Colored Land. This is a hidden gem. It was on every top 10 list you could ever find, and then it fell out of favor, and you don't see it much anymore. Bizarre fantasy sci-fi mix where humans from the future are going back into the Pliocene era and populating Earth that way. Creates, I think, maybe a little bit of a paradoxical question. I have heard that the sequels get really weird. Some people don't like where they go. I thought that it was a really cool work, and I thought that it was solid. I'd be lying to say I was super of the moon about it, but it was definitely one of those stories where I'm like, I'm surprised that more people today aren't reading it. Back in the day, it was super popular. And Julian May, the little I've read of her nonfiction stuff, by nonfiction, I mean like essays and commentary on sci-fi fantasy. I love a lot of what she's had to say, and she's pretty prolific, as is another lady that we'll mention here in a bit that also has kind of been lost in the sauce. I would say Julian May's Many Colored Land is solidly in the B tier. If a series is in here, that means I'm continuing it. Anything below that, it's a case-by-case basis. Like I'm not, anything in D tier, you can just guarantee I'm probably not going to read any more of that series. Hand of Oberon, I'm absolutely going to read book 5 because it's like 100 pages. And then Shaman's Crossing I will read because I have to have a reason to read the next one. So maybe if you want to look at it like that, I don't know. Benjamin said, he said Carrie's writing is S tier, a beta draft. We're good. Yes, absolutely. Severed Echoes by Anya Dillon, friend of me, just disclaimer. Loved it. Absolutely weird fiction. Everything about it was unsuspected. I didn't know what to expect, except that I knew that my friend Amanda had worked really, really hard on this book. And I knew that, she wasn't going to put out something that was just absolute ass, which was very reassuring, to be like, I know this is at least going to be competent, but it ended up being so freaking entertaining. And I was reading it during work meetings on my phone. I mean, I really had a blast with it. And this is going to go all the way up into the A tier, based on exceeding expectations, but also genuinely just really loving it. I thought that the ending was a little too condensed for me. I would have liked to see it a little bit flushed out. One of the rare times I would ever say I wish a book was a little bit longer. But I'm very much awaiting book 2. And also, God, it is so relieving whenever someone writes a book that's good, because I've had friends that have written books, actually even before BookTube, and you read them, and when they're like, I'm pretty bad at the whole faking it thing. I'm not good at it. It would be awkward, but thankfully it wasn't, which is great. Bands of the Morning going into D tier. I did like this book more than Shadows itself. I think it's the best of the 3, but there's really nothing for me in Mistborn Era 2 to care about just personally. Love you too. A Secret History, Ash. Man, very excited about this book. A historical fiction book that is like part fantasy, bohemian, mercenary. I mean, just crazy stuff. Reimagining history, lost history, that the current historical narrative is actually not the complete story, and there's this magical girl, almost like a Joan of Arc type of character, but not directly even mention Joan of Arc in the books, which is pretty crazy. So you're getting this as like written transcripts of this ancient document this guy has found, and then the interludes are him emailing his publicist or somebody, I can't remember exactly who it was, about this account that he has found. And he's like, this is going to shake up the narrative of all of history. Such a cool idea. So many cool action scenes, and some of the stuff that's in this story is wild. I do want to say this is just part 1. I think there are 4 parts, but it's always read as one big book. But I cheated and just read book 1, which is like 300 pages. So it's actually, the whole story is like 1,000 pages, I think. So I need to continue. So this isn't a judgment of the full story. This is just the judgment of like the first half. And it does end in a way where you're like, I need to read the next one. Like, you cannot read this as a standalone at all. And I've heard from many people that the best stuff I'm missing is like later on. So I probably should have read the whole thing, but I wanted to dip my toes a little bit because Mary Gentle is so prolific. This is one I was mentioning also with Julian May, like so prolific, has written a ton of stuff. And this is a series, again, that was really, really popular and kind of fell out of favor. And for this one, I actually see why it fell out of favor. I think there's a lot of really troubling scenes with sexual abuse that were really, really hard to read, which is, that's totally fair for someone to put into their books and to inspect that thing and look at that experience. And I'm fine with that. But it did the thing that I just dislike when books do. And I think it's about like whenever, especially if it's a child, and it's like they use that as like a way of showing like agency or strength. Like it's definitely one of the mistakes I think George made with Daenerys in Game of Thrones, which is my all-time favorite series of all time. I think he was trying to do something, but it didn't age very well at all. And I think there's stuff in this book that did not age super well. I also thought that even though it's like you're supposed to read it because it's like a translated thing, like there was some more modern language in there that like you would just have to kind of excuse, but it did take me out of it just a little bit. So for a first part of a larger narrative that I have not completed, it's kind of an unfair rating, to be honest, but I'm going to put it in C tier here, for sure. So all-time favorite series of all time. Hey, Jared, I do this live. I'm not polished and edited like you, okay? Like you're Hollywood. I'm the independent studios, all right? I don't have the million views, okay? I'm doing this for a small group of people who like me, which is cool, who want to talk about books. I'm not polished like you. Dude, God, Jared, your round glasses. Ugh. All right, William Gibson's Neuromancer. Love the writing, love the book. Don't even like cyberpunk, but this book absolutely slapped. I'm going to put an A tier. I really, really loved it. I want to read the sequels. I'll be honest with you, I never had any plans of reading Neuromancer. I think this won the Patreon pick of the month, which forced me to read it. I had known the first line and how famous it was, but I don't know, man. It really captivated me, even against my biases against cyberpunk and how much I don't really love it. I think Gibson's just a really talented writer, and the scene jumping vignette style actually worked really, really well for me. Belltube said, still much better than my cable access show. Thank you. I appreciate that. Jimmy, Neuromancer changed human history. Automatic S tier. It's close. Steve Donahue says, hey, Steve, what's going on? He said, if Jared's Hollywood and you're independent, who gets to be straight to video porn? Well, you do, Steve. Straight out of Boston, straight to your couch. Triple X Steve Donahue. That you should change your name to Triple X Steve Donahue. I think that would actually be amazing. Also, Steve, I hope you're well. Andre said, I leave for 5 minutes and there's another Wax and Wayne and D. Yeah, it's only going to get worse, brother. It's only going to get worse. Ken Scholl's Lamentation. This is the Psalms of Isaac series, 5-book series. I've been saying it's 4 books for like a very long time now. And unfortunately, it was actually 5. I did a whole reading vlog messing it up because quite frankly, I'm a jackass. But Ken Scholl's did a debut, post-apocalyptic, lost technology found. They think it's magic. It's actually like there's servos running around like it's Elder Scrolls. I thought that was really sick. Ken Scholl's does a lot of really interesting things with like loyalties and purposes behind things. And if someone has a rotten motivation, but good things happen from it, how do we judge those things? And I think Ken Scholl's is telling a pretty cool story. Bridger from the Library Ladder actually told me that this series goes in ways that you would never expect, and that he really, really likes the sequels more, which I think is pretty cool. I personally think that this is much better than a lot of the debut fantasy books that I've read. This is a debut, and it's weird that it's like, I mean, virtually not talked about at all. And I'm not saying it's the next Song of Ice and Fire or Wheel of Time or anything like that, but I'm saying for like, you know, a post-apocalyptic fantasy series, which happens to be something I'm very into, this is solid debut. Really, really good. And this is a series I absolutely plan on continuing for sure. So check it out. Ken Scholl's Lamentation, Psalms of Isaac series. Steve Donnie says Triple X STD. It's very catchy. Hey, there's somebody into it. She was only, Evie says, you have a secret tier below D tier for Just a Little Life, right? No, unfortunately. Zan said, my back alley good read reviews or the porn. Triple X, that's a symbolism for straight edge. I remember I used to throw up the X as a teenager, and that didn't last. Okay, Pop 1280, Psychopathic Sheriff. This is by Jim Thompson, who is a legend of the genre. And I thought it was really well written. I've read a lot of sociopathic main characters, so it kind of gets thrown into that bucket. But I really did enjoy this book quite a bit. It didn't have as much staying power with me past the fact, but I thought the writing was really great. And I would like to read more from Jim Thompson. I'm going to put this in the, it was good category. This was a Patreon pick, I think. Someone can remind me. Silver Spike by Glenn Cook. Glenn Cook, legend, inspired Steven Erikson. A lot of Malazan Marine stuff was inspired by Black Company. It was the first time we really got to see boots on the ground in these large-scale wars. We're getting in the heads of the people and the grunts. And the people who might be fighting for the wrong side, but actually end up being people that maybe you could enjoy just a little bit, but are also rough around the edges. Obviously had a pretty big impact on First Law. I mean, Black Company is legendary for a reason. There's 10 or 11 books at this point. There's going to be a new one published soon, though I heard his most recent one, Port of Shadows, heard it was not great. Silver Spike had a huge weight to lift here because I love the first 3 books. In fact, I think Shadows Linger book 2 of Black Company is one of my favorite fantasy books. It is so good. Edgar Allan Poe vibes off the charts, horror, fantasy mixing with military stuff. It was just so fascinating. Thought The White Rose is actually really, really good just beneath that. And then this actually is supposed to be read like 5th in the series or something, but everyone tells you to read after book 3. So anyways, the Silver Spike stayed in the same location as the White Rose and kind of deals with a lot of the fallout of the characters who aren't going to be moving on to the next place. And for me, I was a little tired of the location, actually, of the Barrens. And it was good, but not great. And it did kind of make me cool off a little bit because after the White Rose, I was like, I am reading Black Company. Like that's the priority here at the Fantasy Network. But after reading Silver Spike, I liked it, but it wasn't like I was dying to get to the next one. So for me, the Silver Spike was enjoyable, but not the greatest. I most likely will continue this year with Shadow Games, I believe is the next one. Andre says, Pop 1280 rocks. Still think about that one a lot. Yeah, I wouldn't mind rereading it, though. It was pretty depraved. Like, it's very, very hard to get through because it's like Disgrace. It's someone that's pretty despicable, in my opinion. Yeah, and I want to say, like, Silver Spike being in C tier, like, I know someone's looking at that and being like, oh, it's towards the bottom, but, like, I really like Black Company a lot. Like, I'm telling you, Shadows Linger, I put it up against almost anything that I've read. Steve says, Glenn Cook fandom, I love to see it. Yes. Not as big as Joseph Reed Books, who is above us here, said Shadows Linger might be the best thing Glenn Cook has ever written, and I should know. Yeah, if you guys like Glenn Cook, go check out Joseph Reed's books. This dude is absolutely fried his brain with He's cooked. He's cooked on Glenn Cook. He read every 63, I think. Joseph, verify that. I think he read 63 Glenn Cook books last year, which is insane. Tired of the Barrowlands? If only the rest of the series was somewhere else. Oh, no. Oh, you're saying that I could move on. Okay. The Witchwood Crown by Tad Williams. The first book in the sequel series, Last King of Osnard, in the Osnard series, following Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Tad Williams, absolute legend. Tad the Chad, as we call him here at the channel. The Witchwood Crown put away all my fears of unnecessary sequels. I was so scared to read these because in the world of limited ideas in Hollywood and publishing, it feels like we always go back to the well one too many times. We make sequels that aren't good, yada, yada, yada. I was like, man, just do not let this be a sequel for sequel's sake. And I think that Tad Williams took a world that I would have said is, up there with the best of them, and he made it even better. And that started with the Witchwood Crown. And I thought that the only thing about this book I didn't like as much as Dragonbone Chair is that Dragonbone Chair's ending is just like so impactful, at least for me. So I ranked it just a little bit beneath that. So I'm going to put this in the A tier. And I thought this book was excellent. And I very much encourage you guys to go and read these sequels. Understand this. The drop off. So Memories on Thorn has been read by millions of people probably at this point, hundreds of thousands, huge rating on Goodreads. The drop off to how many ratings the final book in Memories on Thorn has, which by the way, the retention rate, like, each book gets less. The retention rate of Memories on Thorn is actually pretty good. And then you get Witchwood Crown with the sequel, and it is like a 90%, 99% drop off. I mean, like, there's like 5,000, 10,000 ratings on this thing for someone who's sold millions of books. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it's not like Green Angel Tower bombed. Like, it has, on average, very high ratings. So for me, I don't know. I love this book. I absolutely love it. And I would put it in S tier, but honestly, there's just better books in the series than Witchwood Crown, which is saying a lot, in my opinion. So, Tad time. Yes, it is Tad time. You are right. Dookie Shoe says the books of the South are fine. Good to see you, Dookie. Good to see you, man. Steve said, so are these all the books you read in 2024? Which month of 2024? No, I am not one of these people who read 30 books a month, unfortunately. Actually, fortunately, I would never be able to keep it all in my brain. In fact, I wish I recalled even more than I do right now. Some of the names escape me as far as as far as um, character names go. My internet is potato quality. Is that blue one in See Ash, A Secret History? It is, but I went over the reason why it's not really a fair rating because it's not the full story. It's just part one, which is not really fair because the book is meant to be read as one. So take it for what it's worth. But my issues with it were, you know, the I think more obvious stuff. But said, wow, I would have called that an S or D book, no in between. I actually agree with this. I think most people that read and come back to me would either be S or D. But for me, it could easily be B as well. It's pretty close. Can't change it now, though. Yeah. Cool. All right. So A Little Life. This book. So let me just put this out here. Yeah, I think that this book is wonderfully written. And I think I love so much of what this book was about to be about and then ended up really not doing anything with. So the idea of a bunch of friends, you know, going through super important years together, finding independence, trying to find love, find their meaning in the world, find their professions, find their careers, all in Manhattan. I think it's in the 80s. Am I right? 80s, 90s. And I'm like, man, I love New York City. I think this is going to be so interesting to read. And she essentially does absolutely nothing with New York City and then proceeds to put a character through the ringer in what she dubbed a case for why sometimes people should just kill themselves. So for me, great writing. D tier. This probably would have been like CB. I was very conflicted about it, but like the more I thought about this book and the more I talked about it with people, I really did not like it. And I want to make something very clear. I know people, there are people who are like, this is a terrible example of abuse and how to handle whatever, because like there's a ton of content in here that's very gruesome and graphic. But I actually know people who have been in situations that are, you know, this is like some of the reality. And they said for all intents and purposes, like they actually got something out of it. So like I don't discount anyone who ended up getting something out of A Little Life or that they loved it. And like it is emotional, made me cry at times. But there's something about it just rubbed me the wrong way the whole time I was reading it before I kind of understood how much controversy there was about the author and the case that they were trying to make. And I have a lot more thoughts on this subject, including suicide, but I don't really feel like going into it right now, to be honest with you. But I can just say that it's one of those books that I've read. And usually with really hype books, I always tell people, read hype books because it's fun to have an opinion on. This was not fun, ever. A guy I really love at jiu-jitsu, good dude, smart guy, came up to me and he's like, hey, I watched your channel. And I'm like, oh shit, crap. And he's like, I love Little Life. And I thought he spoke very elegant about it, actually. I thought that he made a pretty good case for it. It made me want to reevaluate it. But, you know, I stuck with my gut on this one. And I didn't love it as much as I had hoped to, especially after the beginning. The beginning was amazing with the forming of the friendships and like the rocky pieces of the friendships between the boys. I thought that all that was actually really well done. And then I felt like she just took a giant shit on it, to be honest. Short Stay in Hell by, is it like Stephen L. Peck? This is another one that I thought would be right up my alley because it's talking about like the afterlife and like what it is. And there's this big library you go and you got to find this book. And I think 10 years ago, I would have loved this. But honestly, I thought it was just fine. Not the worst, but not as impactful as I was kind of hoping. I think I'm the only person I know that did not find this to be like mind-blowing or like really engaging. But I unfortunately I just didn't. The Navigator's Children by Tad Williams. Man, this is going to go in my S tier. I think that this ending for Navigator's Children is pretty fantastic. I love a lot of what Tad ended up going with for the characters that he had introduced in the second half, but also people that were surviving from the first half. And the thing I loved about the Navigator's Children that was so staunchly different than Wind and Truth is that he did a real long falling action that worked for me so well, like so well. And I think that in a time of like 400-page Orbit releases where like it's just like the ending and that was it, and aren't we glad we win, and then that's kind of over. I think Tab Williams is like, no. We're going to kick it back. We're going to go Return of the King style on this and let this thing kind of marinate. And like, you've spent so many, I felt like it was almost like a respect to me as a reader that he wanted to give me so many pages to kind of come to closure at this end of this thing. Maybe possibly. I know he's talked about other stuff, but like, this could be the last time we ever see a main series Ostenard release. And I just thought that Tad did a wonderful job in paying homage to people that had come before him, but also being his own thing, which is what he's always done. So for me, I really just thought it was fantastic. And it deserves the S tier for sure. For sure. I'm sorry, Amanda. I know that you love A Short Stay in Hell. I'm sorry. HR says, I hope it's not the HR department. Am I right, guys? Or am I right? Huh? Okay. Jimmy, you might want to read the Library of Babel short story from Borges, inspired Short Stay in Hell. I actually have it. I got a bunch of Borges recently. I'm probably saying his name wrong. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. Make room in S tier, Freddie. What's the best place to start with Tad? I think Dragon Bone Chair is fine. If you like epic fantasy and you want to go on like a slow, methodical or meandering, however you look at it, fantasy ride, I do think that that's the way to go. Shad says the following action was top tier. I'm glad you agree. Shuffle and Stable says Short Stay in Hell ranking. I loved it. I told Jimmy he'd love it, and I was wrong. He's really, but really, he's the wrong one. I'm always the wrong one. I think this is the only time, and I didn't hate it, but it's the only time I've not like loved something you recommend. So you're like 99% with me. And to be fair, I don't know why. I'm honestly not sure why I don't like it that much. That is such a dad joke. Well, I am a dad, Anitha, so that makes sense. To two cats. To two cats. Okay. The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Murakami, a book about loneliness in a well, and has horrific scenes of war and flashbacks. And there's so much about this book that I think is like S tier writing, but then there's also a bunch of the stuff that I found to just kind of be either not engaging or like, slightly cringe, as is with Murakami at times. This one's tough. I definitely like it less than Hardboiled Wonderland and the Other World. So I think I'm going to put this in the C tier. This is going to go in the C tier. I think this is a pretty good introduction for Murakami based on just a few things that I've read from him. And I don't think it's a bad book by any means. I think the phone calls, like, man, how many phone calls can this guy get that like ruin his day? But I also thought it was just, there's something about stories that take really, really plain things and then turn them into something slightly more interesting or fantastical even, which Murakami flirts with, that I do find engaging. But I always feel like when it comes to Japanese translated works that like Murakami's always the one mentioned. And I know there has to be like a million more that are probably even better, but he's just like the guy, And Wind-Up Bird Chronicle was good enough to make me want to read more translated works, which is really great. And I was like, I want to read more Japanese stuff. But it also did have me want to read more Murakami. So I think it accomplished its goal. The well scene is wild. Absolutely wild. Okay, The Waking Fire by Anthony Ryan. This was a Patreon pick and got lost in the shuffle. I'm going to be really reductive and stupid. Just bear with me, Anthony Ryan stands. But like, this is basically Anthony Ryan being like, what if I did Mistborn, but like did it really well? And I actually really like this book, and I thought that it was really good. Talking about like different types. I believe it was like dragon's blood or vern blood, like their animal blood or something like that. I'm butchering this terribly. But essentially, there's things that you can ingest that give you powers, and they're fighting over resources. I think this book was trying to combine a couple different things that were in the genre at the time and not doing it always perfectly. But I'll be damned if I didn't think that this book was really good. And as I'm staring at it, I'm like, this is B tier. It was a solid book. I do remember when I read The Waking Fire, I was not in the mood for it, which really hurt my experience. But when I think back on it, it was pretty good. I like this a lot more than The Pariah, personally. Oh, Born by Jeff Vandermeer. Little amoeba, weird thing, aiding a woman who is in a post-apocalyptic world, which is always my favorite thing. A lot of like I think it's called biopunk, but there's like a bear that like lives over a city, and he's like the size of the city, and they don't want to run into him. And there's like android weird inventions running around in a company that like absolutely screwed the world over and where they live. And she's like trying to decide if she really loves the person she's with, but it like goes with her survival, and it like kind of fights between the idea of like evolutionary pairing with someone and then also like who you really want to be with. I don't know. I thought this was pretty good, honestly. I think this book, I feel about this book how people feel about Project Hail Mary, which I liked. I thought was fine. But like the quirky little side companion thing, I think Bourne's way better. I think Bourne's way better. This is like verging on S tier for me, but I'm going to put it in A tier because, oh man, I don't know. Bourne by Jeff Vandermeer is a banger. It's really, really, really good and got better as I got even more distance from it. So tough one. I'd love to see if anyone else has read Bourne in the chat. Okay, Jimmy has to have kids, if only to refer to them as the nutlets. I think that can get you arrested in some states. Andre said the first half is S plus tier, the slice of wife life, then it dropped like a lead balloon for me. Oh, you're talking about the Windenburg Chronicle? Yeah, I think Murakami is a little bit like Jim Butcher for me, where like I don't know many people who start out the gate as hot. Like I'm just always into the beginning of the novel, but it's like a 50-50 shot whether or not I'm going to enjoy it by the end. That's one thing I will say for Jim Butcher. I'm not the biggest Harry Dresden fan, but my God, Jim Butcher might be the best opener in fantasy. Yeah, I honestly would recommend more people read The Waking Fire by Anthony Ryan. I think it's really, really good. Shot said Mistborn taking shots from all over the place tonight. Very similar. Very, very similar to 2022 tier ranking, I think. Jimmy, you read The Moon on you. Oh, I think you need to read Moon of the Crusted Snow. It's post-apocalyptic. Send it to me in Discord, and I will add it to my TBR. 1,000%. Some people were I'm actually surprised by this. Some people were saying they wanted Bourne in S tier. I didn't think, have a lot of people read Bourne? I'm so out of the loop at this point, but I am pretty cool. Britton says, I thought Jimmy was anti-natal or didn't want to have kids or something. What a weird thing to say, Britton. What an odd thing to say. Is Bourne related to the Southern Reach trilogy? No, it is not. It's a standalone, and it is, honestly, dude, I think it's a slammer. I said it's a standalone. I think there's like novellas that kind of tie in with it, if I'm not mistaken. But it's not tied to the Southern Reach trilogy at all, which is no longer a trilogy, by the way. There's a new one out if you didn't know, and I've heard it's pretty good. All right. Annihilation is S tier. Holly, I would agree. What a banger. I've been actually thinking about rereading Annihilation and reading the sequels, even though I know there's a lot of contention about the sequels. The Changeling by Victor Laval. This was Alex's pick. Tall Guy Reads. I miss him dearly. One of my favorite booktube channels. I honestly felt like he was going to be the guy to replace me. I thought he was the most like me. And that's why I like him so much. He was also 6'8", so if I didn't, he would step on me. But The Changeling by Victor Laval is very like critically acclaimed, kind of a horror, folklore, fantasy type deal. A book collector is the main character that has this child, and the child is involved in this house fire. It's actually, there's some incredible scenes in this book, and I love the premise. I love the fact there's a bookseller, but I did not really enjoy this book this much. I certainly liked it more than, you know what? It's not fair. I think it's a pretty good book. I'm actually, you know what? I'm going to be hard. I'm going to put it in the D. I did not really enjoy where the book went. I didn't really enjoy much outside of the first like 200 pages or 100 pages. And the problem is that there is an event in the first 100 pages that is so wild and excellently written that he never gets to that height again. You know what I mean? Like the book goes up and then you come down, and he tries to do a climax and these other things, and they just don't work as well. If this was a short story, it would have been a banger. Wouldn't have had much closure though. It would have been pretty depressing. So I'm going to be a little bit hard on Changeling. I'd be willing to hear an argument for it to be higher though, for sure. Yeah. So Jinx says, Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne. Oh my goodness, I love it. Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. I'm actually reading the sequel to this right now and regretting that I waited so long to read it. I've been talking to my friend Ben, who is one of only like 5 people that like this book, and it's actually kind of insane, like the questions that are left open. But Black Leopard, Red Wolf follows a guy named Tracker who is in messy relationship with a leopard and is also has like superhuman abilities to like track people, which is why he is named Tracker, though it's not his real name, or I should say his first name. And this book is all in the setting of like African mythology and lore and history, and in Africa that, like, when I say African mythology and lore and you know, maybe verging into religious territory, this is like pre anyone coming to the continent, like before Islam or Christianity made its way to the continent. And it has some of the most metal things I have ever read in a book. The only problem I've had with Marlon James, and this is consistent among this and The Moon Witch and the Spider King, which I'll cover in my wrap up for this month at the end of the month, and also in the little bit that I was able to sample from a brief history of 7 killings, is that he does get a little long in the tooth at times, and he can lose me every now and then. I think he could be more concise. I think he would be writing 5-star 400 page books, but he happens to write 600, 700 page books. But I love this book, with the notice that most of you will not like it. I think only 2 people I know who have tried it since I gave it the nut button back in the day have tried it and really liked it. Most people hate these books. It's written in in like the vernacular, the dialect of someone telling you a story over the campfire that is African, and in the way that it would be spoken to you. I think it's just really phenomenal. But the bigger thing is just how ridiculously amazing some of the world is. And yes, it's pulled from African lore, but it's, you know, he makes it his own thing too. I mean, there's like lightning, bats, vampire things. I mean, there's like anything you can imagine, changelings, skinwalkers. Like there's a total amount of like indescribable things actually in the world building that I think is pretty cool and remarkable. I really love this book. And the more I have actually been reading the sequel, I haven't been sure if I like it as much as book 1, but after talking with my friend Ben about it, it's actually one of the very few series that I find myself like Googling and searching for and trying to find other people who've enjoyed it to hear their thoughts and their takes, because Tracker is an unreliable narrator in this book, but so is Sogalon in book 2. And I just find the use of perspective to be refreshing. And I think if you're a Gene Wolfe fan, this is probably something you should be checking out. And there are times where he writes something and he describes like a setting that I'm just like super captivated by. But there is like 15% of the book that I'm like, maybe we don't do this. Maybe we don't. With a huge asterisk, by the way, this is super grim. This is super dark. Very tough scenes to read at some points. Some stuff that genuinely made my like stomach kind of curl, which is very rare. So it's very dark. I've never read anything quite like it. So take that for what it's worth. I love Black Leopard, Red Wolf, though. It absolutely stands out to be something that is at least unique for me. So, you guys having fun? You having fun out there? I'm having fun. This is a good time. Good time. What a bad week I had. God damn. Could have been worse. Could have been a lot worse. But still was not very good. Was not very good. Harry Dresden says, I really think you'd enjoy Patrick DeWitt. Sorry. You should start with either Ablutions or French Exit. I could see them becoming favorites of yours. If you don't mind, Harry, it's hard for me to keep track of chat. So if you could comment on the video with your recommendations after the fact, I will put it on my TBR, please. Thanks. Samwise, you will probably hate Black Leopard, Red Wolf. Yeah. Amanda says, Lamau, a messy relationship with a leopard. What a line. Oh, yeah. There's some pretty wild stuff. HR said Black Leopard, Red Wolf got a little too edgelordy by the end. I could see that. I mean, it's definitely tough. But you said the good writing overall and the vibe was great. Yeah. I'm so excited to get to A Brief History of 7 Killings. I've been watching Get Millie Black, which is an HBO Max show. It is a Jamaican true crime show. I shouldn't say true crime. It's a Jamaican crime drama. And it's written by Marlon James. And one of the things that he does in the show that is so similar to all of his books is that he's very obsessed with like focusing on a perspective and their interpretation of events. And he actually does this almost episode to episode in Get Millie Black, even though it's not like the same story from different perspective each time. It's the recalling those events, but still moving the plot forward, which I think the TV show is really good for. And I would highly recommend, if you're into crime dramas, to check out Get Millie Black on HBO Max. It's fantastic. Also, it's the sponsor of tonight's show. I'm just kidding. Do you think the buffalo is real or not? We'll never know, bro. We'll never know. What's up? What's up, Tank? Good to see you. My friend, Gene Leopard, Red Wolf. I have a feeling that Marlon James would find that very funny. Very, very funny. Yeah, crime drama. Shit. Yeah, you should definitely check out Get Millie Black. Very different from The Wire, but also very good. Empire of Grass. Absolute heater. Sets the stage for books 3 and 4 in The Last King of Oceanard. I've kind of talked about Last King of Oceanard. This is going to go in the A tier. Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This is definitely my favorite from him. I've only read a few books by him. I thought Beartown was absolutely incredible. One of the best opening pages of any book that I've ever read. Has all the small town stuff wrapped up in hockey drama. I was captivated by it, and also Mrs. Nuts very much likes this series, so I have to put it up there. Ohio by Stephen Markley. It's kind of odd that these two books were actually put together because they're both about small towns, except that Ohio takes place in Appalachia and understands Appalachia. It is not used just as a set piece as it was in the book Mechanized My Hands to War. I think Ohio actually is from a person who understands that perspective from those small towns and very real situations. Like Steubenville, terrible situations that happen, not just in Ohio, but in all of Appalachia and really across the country, but Appalachia having its own special breed of messed up. I think Ohio by Stephen Markley is wonderfully written. I would love to read The Deluge by him. And the fact that he understands the paranoia of running into someone you know in Kroger, I mean, my God, folks, how could it be any better? I think Ohio is going to go to A tier. Very close to S tier. Very, very close. Amanda says, I'm going to read Ohio this year, and I don't think I'm even going to go wait till Kevtober. I'm going to tell you, it's Ohio out of all these books, and you guys know I read a lot of like very dark things. I would say that Ohio is probably in the top 3 most dark. And it's dark because it literally, quite literally happened. Like, I know of this situation happening. I'm not saying that it's written on true events, but I'm saying things like this happen all the time. And it's brutally infuriating. My Brilliant Friend, I covered this on the last wrap up on my channel. You go check this out. Me and Mrs. Nuts read this because StoryTube gifted it to us because they're wonderful people. And I loved the first half of this book, and I thought the second half was pretty good, but it wasn't my favorite of the bunch. And I'm excited to continue, but I'm not going to be in a rush for it. So I'm going to put this in the B tier. Heart of What Was Lost by Tad Williams. A novel, it's like 120, 200 pages to bridge Memory of Thorn, Last King of Ostenard. Underrated. Tremendous. Heart of What Was Lost. A siege. Cowardice. Bravery. A tier. Fantastic. Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. A through line that you could barely balance a razor on of how these things connect and writing in different types of narrative structures, but also different ways of telling a story in different genres. And David Mitchell is doing what Stephen King actually claimed to be a stunt. And he might not be entirely wrong, but that stunt is goddamn great. And David Mitchell is hilarious. He's thoughtful. And he's also just one of the more brilliant people who can bring out emotions and talk about things that we should be talking about as a human race. Cloud Atlas is going into the S tier, possibly maybe I would say this is in the top 3 books of all time for me. And it probably won't be for you. Big asterisk, you probably won't like it. Into the Narrow Dark, the 3rd book, which was split with Navigator's Children. And it's the only time in the fantasy genre that I've seen a book split and not have any repercussions from it because it was excellent. And I'm putting Into the Narrow Dark into S tier. I love this book. I thought that he split it at the exact perfect moment. If you hadn't told me it was split, I would have never freaking known. I would have never known that. I thought that Into the Narrow Dark was just an absolute slammer. Loved it. I loved it. Murphy says, "Sir, can Clarence Gunn skip the list? I want to see where it ranks." I got to keep, you know how it is, watch time retention. I got to keep you going. You know what, Murphy? Because you're such a good friend and you put up with all my BS, I will rank it next. And Claire and the Sun, it will be going into the S tier. I love this. I love this. One, I loved reading it with Murphy and Joanna, but this is actually in the Ishiguro fandom, which is, bristling online. Not really. This is probably one of the lower ranked Ishiguro books. A lot of sci-fi fans read it because it's sci-fi and don't like it because it's not sci-fi enough. And a lot of Ishiguro fans say this isn't snobby enough. I freaking loved Claire and the Sun. I think it's relevant. I think that it is a great balanced take on maybe the AI situation, artificial friend, but again, as all of his books do, inspecting mortality. And I think some of the stuff that he hints at and never explains to you, like everyone seems to want to explain every single thing about their world or their world building or their plot. Ishiguro just gives you this little tiny thing, this little, speck of world building. And if you are willing to go beyond the very plain words he used to write his books, you can actually start to theorize about what this world looks like. And maybe it is informing the cast that we're seeing and how they are acting. I think me and Murphy and Joanna, I think we exchange voice messages for like 2 to 3 hours total about the state of the world and what he is hinting at. And for me, it was incredible. I think that there are so many people that write like science fiction and fantasy that can look at Claire and the Sun and understand that you can get so much out of so little. If you read Claire and the Sun on the surface and you're just reading for a story and whatever, like I could see it being very disappointing. I could see it being boring. I could see not liking Ishiguro as a whole. But if you're willing to engage with the things that are between the words and unsaid, one, Ishiguro is going to be a great author. But two, Claire and the Sun is a slammer, like certified slammer book. And one that I would love to talk about more, one that I would love to reread. And it has solidified, Ishiguro is the only author I've ever read. I would say like Barbara Kingsolver, Ishiguro, and David Mitchell are all in like very rare air. I think Ishiguro, if I'm being honest with myself, is probably the only author that I'm like, is he going to be in competition with George R.R. Martin for my favorite author? Like, I love him that much. I think he's just absolutely incredible. I have complaints about Gurm's stuff too, but like, man, do I love it. But if you're just going to read it for like the surface level thing, and I'm not meaning that to be patronizing or anything, but like if you're not someone who likes to sit and like ruminate on a chapter and think about it, and what else is going on in this world that he's not telling me, this book is probably going to be super mid for you, if not bad. But for me, and the way I read and the way I like to read, couldn't be any better. Couldn't be any better. So good. Meowcat says, I love how Ishiguro doesn't have to describe the world exactly, but he says it in a way that you just feel it. Murphy is very excited about this. I'm glad. Yes, it was last year I read Killer Angels. I actually gave it to my father-in-law, and he's reading it right now, which is really cool. Putrid Sunrise says, kind of like Philip K. Dick, he'll drop a sentence of world building and move on. Actually, not entirely dissimilar, except I think that Ishiguro is much better. Jared says, it's not a gimmick. It's just great. Matt Keane says, it's a little gimmicky, but enjoyable. I thought it was pretty excellent. I think it's a really good use of perspective. And I loved it. Rebecca said, wait, you just read Mechanize My Hands the Word this month. I read it last month, and I actually ended up DNFing about 70% of the way through. It kind of lost me a little bit. Super unfortunate. Jimmy Reed, The Unconsoled. I think this is going to be my next Ishiguro. And I'm very, 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 very excited. Ishiguro is the only author I've ever read. You're taking me out of context, Jared. Don't make me call Philly on. And by the way, I would say this is one. Kale says, I ruminate about real life. I try not to because it depresses me. Claire and the Sun is one of those books that like I am very sure about. I will hear criticisms, whatever, but like I'm not going to be shaken on this. Like anything in S tier, I'm not going to be shaken on, I don't think. Ton of French, The Searcher, I've talked about this. Chicago PD officer retires in Ireland, And I really, really, really love this book, and I'm going to put it in A tier. I want to read more of this. Ton of French. I'm actually a little bit more interested in her Dublin murder series. I think that that's going to be a lot of fun. But Ton of French's writing, she's an amazing writer that just happens to be writing in crime. Like, she could write in any genre, I bet, and succeed. And she's very accomplished, and also just really nailed Ireland in the vibe that I got when I was there. Lapvona by Otessa Moshfegh. This is not as good as My Year of Rest and Relaxation, but Lapvona all about classism, and it's also very disgusting, but about a boy who sees the worst of class and the best of class. And the more I sat on this book, the more I liked it, and I'm actually going to put this in A tier. I know that this A tier looks pretty stacked, but I also had a pretty great year. Lapvona was great. Very, very good. Has almost like a theatrical feel to it. You feel like it's on stage. Feels like it's on stage at the time of being presented to you. It's very, very good. Maybe a bit much for some people, or maybe not enough for others. We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. Book I was super duper excited about. I kept hearing more and more about it. I went over it. I said that there was only one compelling part of this book. I really liked the post like dominated or captured land, this outside threat that we didn't know. It was fine. It was okay. It was all right. Hobo Giant, thank you so much for the $9.99. So when are we getting to the Patreon pick of mid-month? There might be some changes. There might not be any more In a Nutshells, but we might be doing... All I can say is, and I got to wait, but we might be doing a hybrid of Chatting with Nuts and In a Nutshell every 2 weeks, which would change the Patreon pick a little bit. Zan said, no more A-tier books, Jimmy. A's closed. We are maxed out at capacity. We cannot fit any more into the top tier. Dark One saying did not like We Are the Dead. There's one really good POV, and the rest of it felt half-baked to me. Are you going to continue the Mike Shackle series? No, I'm not. And you know what? For that, I'll actually drop it. It's going to go in the D tier. It's going to go in the D tier, not because I can't. I did not dislike it as much as the other ones. And honestly, the Changeling should probably be in C tier as well. But I don't know. I'm not going to think about it too much. Who cares? Meowcat said, I like Lapvona more than My Year of Rest and Relaxation. That's fair. Yeah. I didn't mean that like when I said that, like that there was no other, you know what I mean? Like they're very different. Tyrion of Faith by Richard Swan. Book 2 in the series for Justice of Kings, or the, the Empire of the Wolf or whatever. He's writing a Dread Empire series, which is like in a different timeline. Like it's in the same world, but far enough removed you don't have to read the other ones. I thought book 2 was pretty good. I actually quite liked it. And I think Richard Swan has a lot of potential. I said Justice of Kings was like one of those books where it's a debut, and I'm like, man, this is really good. Ironically, I think that Ken Scholl's debut is better than Richard Swan's. Richard Swan's next series is supposed to be, he does like a lot of different stuff well. Cosmological, like horror, like cosmic horror. He does that really well. And I've heard that the new book that he's coming out with, he's written 3 books now. He's got a little under his belt. Apparently, it really leans in to like the pirate / cosmic horror angle. And I think it'll be better for it. But I like Tyrion of Faith. I thought it was pretty good. I did end up liking it more than third book, which is Trials of Empire. I'm going to just go ahead and grab this. This was just okay. There was a romance angle that was not believable in the least. I am not against romance. I love romance in books. I think it's part of the human condition. I think it's super cool when it's in books. He didn't do it well here, in my opinion. Teabaggin says, I predicted you would dislike it. I'm anything but unpredictable. I'm very predictable. Reader's Journey said, I'd DNF that sucker. Hell yeah. Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. I use this term lightly, but this is a masterpiece of a book. I can't think of anything I was more infatuated with than maybe your mom. I think that's probably the only other thing I can think of. It's funny doing a your mom joke about a Nobel Prize winner of literature. Remains of the Day is an absolute slammer. I've talked about it at length. If you like Downton Abbey, you should check it out. I've never watched it, but that's what everyone tells me. Book's an absolute slammer. Don't get wrapped up too much in your career. Do not forget about the little experiences that you need to go along with that career and that success, because if you miss out on those human connections, you end up being a very limited person. And if you hand over the keys to your morality and to your representation to someone that you should not trust, there's a chance that you're going to represent something that is awful. And if you spend your entire life doing that and the rug is pulled, like, it's a bad feeling. But also, like, it really reminds me that we're never like safe. And I've been reminded of this week with just like stuff going on in my life, is like, no matter what you do all the right things, you clock it, whatever, you're not guaranteed safety. You're not security, any of it. Very few people in the world ever. And honestly, none. And you might do something you think is noble your entire life, dedicate your entire person to it, your entire personality, your life to this thing, and you could be at the tail end and get rug pulled. You might say, well, that's not likely. Well, maybe not, but it could happen. And I think it's so important to like diversify yourself in experiences and in what you spend your time in, and not becoming limited. And I think It Remains of the Day is a beautiful, beautiful reminder of that, while also making a statement about a world post-World War II. And how things were changing. And I think Remains of the Day is a masterpiece. I think it's so good. It's so good. Also, it's really funny. Like, I don't know. I thought it was hilarious. Rodrigo liked the mom joke. Carl voice, God damn it, Jimmy. I know you said no, but can you reorder S tier at the end? No. I got to stick to my guns, Andre. I'm sorry. Remote Control by Nanetti Okorafor. Loved this little novella. I thought this was actually pretty great, and I wanted more from it. Girl has like incredibly dangerous powers. So you have like a small girl who's actually like an existential threat to the people around her, and she's being perceived one way and internally feeling a much different way, but has to use that power to kind of survive. Very fascinating. Post-apocalyptic, almost futuristic for sure, in Africa. Very unique. Loved it. Want to read more from her for sure. Also, for my George fans out there, George R. R. Martin, huge fan of this author. He's working on an adaptation for her trilogy as a television show for HBO. Will and Testament by Vigdis Horth. I don't know. This is a family drama about inheriting a bunch of cabins with a very dark undertone to it. And this book was really great to read. I would say that I really liked it. I don't know if I would put it as like an all-timer, but as far as a family drama, I'm blanking on many things that would be better than it. So I'm kind of between A and B. And I'm going to put it in B simply because I like symmetry. Expert analysis here at the Fantasy Network. Only the best. Only the best. A Reader's Journey said, I've spent my entire adult life not dedicating myself to a career. Very based. Very, very based. If you go bottom right, you can still rank some books in A, Jimbo. Murphy said, here we go. I'm pretty sure I know where My Dark Vanessa is going. Yes. Remember I talked about important books earlier? This is one of them. Yeah, this is A tier. A girl who is abused by someone who she should be able to trust, a teacher. It's been done to death. A lot of people compare it to Lolita, but from like a victim's perspective, I think it is as nuanced as it gets. It is hard to get through. I think this is one of two books I've ever thrown across the room, not because I hated it, but because like I was so angry. I had to take long breaks in this book, but my God, did I feel like, do I feel like I had like done something with my time after I had read it and had a new perspective on things. And like abuse is such a complex topic, and it changes a person so much and does not affect the person just in the moment that they are being abused, but you know, decades after, even years and years and years after. And it makes that person in some ways hard to get along with. It could make them seem irrational at times, but this is not something you wipe under the rug. Time heals all. Bullshit. My Dark Vanessa is an important book. And yeah, it's important to me for the way I can relate to it. So Anitha says, move it, Jimmy. I'm falling asleep. Anitha, I'm trying to talk about a very serious subject and you're making it very difficult. You're ruining my live stream. God damn it. Kyra says, Black Leopard, Red Wolf, A tier, please explain why. I did when I put it in there, but for me, I really, really enjoyed the writing style of it. And I also enjoyed the use of an unreliable narrator along with the African mythology, while also admitting that there are parts of the book that feel extremely long-winded, maybe a little bit verbose. And it's also very difficult to get through because a lot of it is, quite frankly, pretty grim. So I hope that kind of answers your question. But also, I put a disclaimer at the beginning that I am just a jackass with a really, really nice microphone and that none of the thing I say is an authority or objective. So you shouldn't care what I think. Have I read Lolita? No. It's just one of those books I don't really want on my shelves. You know, it's like Berserk. I got to keep it out of the reach of people so they don't open it up on accident. Murphy with the crying faces. Shelf Unstable says, Tampa is the real uncomfy one in the MDV Lolita realm. 10 out of 10. Do not recommend. Okay. Interesting. Jack said, love the Osnar books. How do you think we can get more people to read them? I feel like a lot worse books get more readers. Well, that's absolutely correct, Jack. And I don't know what else I could really do. I mean, I can start threatening people with violence, but I think YouTube frowns upon that. So now we have Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's fun. It's a good book. I think it throws literally everything in the kitchen sink at the reader to laugh at, and it lands like 2 to 3% of the time, which is more than most novels. I think the premise is absolutely amazing of being on this like apocalyptic world-ending television shows where aliens are cheering you on and you have to get a personality, and it has a cat character, which is fun. I just had a good time with it. You know, I'm not mesmerized by it, but I do like that Matt Dinniman writes in a way that is like very distinct to himself. The thing I will say about Dungeon Crawler Carl is that I think that this book is at risk for not aging well because of how many pop culture references there are and things that are really in the internet zeitgeist, which makes sense, but for the way that it was originally published, serialized, right? And I don't know. I'm actually kind of shocked for how popular it is, for how crude that it can be. Because the book has some raunchy humor. Like there's an announcer with a foot fetish and stuff. Very like internet centric, right? I bet Reddit loves this book. I don't think it's going to age all that well. I think Ready Player One sees this issue, especially with the sequel. I wonder if Dungeon Crawler Carl will feel the same way after a few years, but I can only rate it based on like the here and now, and I really enjoyed it. So for me, I think that it's fun. It's a good time. And I could see the premise carrying me into the sequels for sure. For sure. You should stop calling yourself stupid. You might start believing it. I've believed that for a long time. After being a chicken for 5 years, I'm finally going to read My Dark Finesse this year. Godspeed. It's very rough. Very, very rough, man. Daniel Green entered the chat. Did he? Am I missing it? Am I missing? Or did he say the same thing? Gavin says, Dungeon Crawler Carl, too low, automatic S for Gossip Girl references. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, if one of these references hit for you, catapults it, right? And honestly, it's probably a C tier book, but I can't lie. I was smiling and having a good time with it, to be honest with you. Jack said, I guess it could serve as a time capsule, possibly, for sure. And there's always people in the future that like really like there's people I grew up with that like love the 70s, and I'm like, that's fine. So Kyra says, yeah, Dungeon Crawler Carl is mid, aggressively mid. Fair enough. What does S ranking stand for? I guess supreme or stellar or super or stupendous or sexy. I don't really know. I just know it's higher than A. It's like God tier, you know? Dark One Stain says, well, that sounds absolutely terrible. That's really funny. Harry Joseph said, Daniel loves Dungeon Crawler Carl. That's cool. I thought Daniel's review of When in Truth was really good. I thought it was excellent. Love to see it. Really like to see it. Audiobook helps a lot for Dungeon Crawler Carl. Yeah, I think it's better. Like, I feel like as a book, it's fine. Like, it's probably below average, but like as a presentation or a performance, it's much better. And this is why I think that there's a really good chance that the TV adaptation could work. And I think Seth MacFarlane doing it is probably the best case because it is the Family Guy of fantasy in many ways to me. A Little Life made S tier that my Dark Vanessa cover is too similar from afar. No. Little Life is all the way down here. Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I like this book, but it was also very over the top and almost absurdist at times. And I think that the humor did not necessarily work for me, but I did like the overall messaging of it, dealing with like very serious things like suicide and family drama, but didn't ever get above like a B tier for me. I really liked Beartown more. I do not hate Anxious People. We had a good time listening to it in the car. Me and Kelsey did. But the humor, I can't rank it above C just because I didn't like the humor in it. And there is a lot of humor. Aversion by Alistair Reynolds. So good. Doctor on a boat in like the late 1700s, I think, or maybe it's the late 1800s, and is addicted to morphine, and sci-fi things happen from there. And if you've ever seen 1899 or 1809 or whatever that show was that from the Dark Creators on Netflix that got canceled, this is the book that I would say is a very good recommendation for you. I'm going to put an S tier. I really, really liked Aversion. It's like 300 pages. For what it is, a standalone sci-fi novel, it is so good. I don't think it's super unpredictable, and I think that he ties it in nicely at the end. It's like really close to being A tier. Like really, really close to being. You know what? I didn't love... I like the ending. The first half of the book is better than the second half. I think to be fair, I have to put it... Yeah, I have to put it here. I have to put it in A tier, and the reason why is if I put that in A tier, then I have to put Use of Weapons, all Ishiguro books, and Ohio, and probably Guy Gavriel K more over it. So that's a tough one. It's a tough one. Oh, some people don't like it at all. Damn. Rick Thunder says Dungeon Crawler Carl is hot tub tier. That's a fact. I love to see it. Yeah, this is a hard one because now that I'm looking at it, like Ohio could probably get its way up into S tier, to be honest with you. As well as Use of Weapons. Like, Use of Weapons is an absolute slammer. All right, let's go with Toe by Catherine Dunn. This is a book about psychologically, I don't know how to... a person who's going through a lot, and it's a very psychological read, and of a person who's like getting arrested for lashing out in public, who is like falling prey to what I would consider to be a very charismatic, like cult-like figure. But the narrative is like crazy messy. And I believe this book was published after Catherine Dunn died, and an editor fixed it up and put an ending on it. And I could feel that. But this book is wild. It is wild. And if you're wanting to step into the shoes of someone who is kind of like losing their grip on things, but also be seen for like wanting to be an introvert, but also somehow like you're like, I'm never leaving my house again. And then all of a sudden you're like talking to the person in the ice cream aisle and you're like, why am I talking to this person? I hate people. I just want to stay and be a hermit, but here I am. Like the undeniable urge to be connected to something larger than yourself, even though you want to be an introvert. I think Toad is a pretty powerful read for that, but it is narratively like not the most satisfying. So I'm going to put it in B tier, but Catherine Dunn's writing is also really good, I think. So that is one of my friend Ben's one of his favorite books, I think, and favorite authors. I believe she is Australian, I think. Sword of the Lictor by Gene Wolfe. This is my favorite book in the New Sun. It goes in S tier. This book, by the ending, when this book ended, I was just like, holy shit. Like, I was like, this is insane. And this is the book that made me really want to start a reread immediately. And so, the fourth book probably is just as good, but there's something about Sword of the Lictor that felt a little bit more familiar than the others to what I've read prior. And I just loved this. And this is what made Book of the New Sun like a top 10 series for me. So Sword of the Lictor is the one above the rest for me. So, Our Shared Life by Mariana Enriquez. This is a translated work of paranormal horror. Wow, what a book covering a lot of different things, especially when it comes to generational trauma, in the occult, and historical events that are just as terrifying and as grim as the things in the book that are made up. But this book felt like it would never end. And I think that there's an S tier book there. And for some people, it's going to be S tier. It's very critically acclaimed. Actually, Ishiguro loves this book. I think it's like his favorite horror book. He praised it very much. But Our Share of Night just didn't quite get there for me. And I started to feel a little bit taxed by it. And I just wanted it to be over, especially like the last quarter of this book, for sure. Sounds like the book version of I Want to Be Invited So I Can Say No. Yes. Absolutely. Ben said he's going to menacingly deliver a copy of Greek Love to your house once a week until you read it. I mean, just send it. You don't need to send it. I'll just get it. Don't worry about it. Ouch, that one hurts. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in that C tier, to be honest with you. But yeah, the book, I can't deny the fact that I was like dying at some points of this book. So let's see. The Last Murder. Oh, by the way, Catherine Dunn is not Australian. She's quintessentially Portland, Oregon. So she is not Australian. I was mistaken. My apologies. Okay. So Hayden Lyle says, Jimmy, just joining, having a great time. What separates the A tier from the S tier for you? It's simply all-timers. That's it. Like books that I would have to be like, if I made a big list that they would have, if I made a top 10 books, like they would have to be in the consideration. Now, that doesn't mean there's only 10 of them, because like there's probably 9 right there, I think. So like there's a lot of books there, but books that I deem to be important or like just absolute standouts and that remind me why I love reading. Not saying that none of these books down here can't, but these are like all-timers for me, I would say. And if I really wanted to get picky, I could probably start dropping maybe some stuff from here, but I'm kind of going based on the year of reading that I've had, which was like a lot of good and just a few, a smaller fraction that were just truly amazing. So I love everything in A tier. I love things about things in B tier. I like things about C tier, edging on love. And then D tier, I just didn't work, right? Yeah, Brady, I would like to read some short fiction from Gene Wolfe as well, man. I think that would be pretty fantastic. Stuart Turton, one of the bigger surprises of the year. I bought it off a cover by, and the title, Last Murder at the End of the World, you guessed it, post-apocalyptic encapsulated population that is having to trust their superiors of why this is happening. There's a fog moving in the world that kills everything it touches. This island is the last place left. The scientists are the people who are keeping this at bay. However, one of the scientists who are keeping all these people alive, the last people on Earth, dies, and he's been murdered. Murder is obviously illegal at this point. And this book was just based on premise and the cover and the title. I said, I want to read more post-apocalyptic stuff. I love a good murder mystery. And oh my goodness, I love this book. I thought it was really great. Not an all-timer. I can't speak for the genre of like murder, mystery, crime, any of that stuff because I'm not that well read in it. But I really loved it, and I bought all of his other stuff, which is really just 2 other books. But really fun read, solid, putting it in a B tier, went by super fast. We'll definitely read everything Stuart Turton puts out, for sure. A little bit of that sci-fi. A little bit of that sci-fi vibe there, which I really, really liked, and I think he did a nice job with. The kind of like walled population reminded me a little bit of like Attack on Titan, which I thought was kind of sick, but it's nothing like Attack on Titan either, so don't take that recommendation for that. Ohio is about as close to S tier as it gets without being S tier. I just don't think I would include Ohio on my favorite books of all time list, unfortunately. The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard, I think. Scott Howard. He was on Talking Stories channel. They recommended me this book because it's supposedly like David Mitchell. This author gets placed in the literary fiction section, but probably should be more in the fantasy section or sci-fi section. I thought it was a really good debut, and I really, really liked the interview that they did with him. And I thought this book had a lot of promise, and I think it does things with time travel timeline that is a little different, even though it's like hitting a lot of the same beats. I think the way that he actually displays the timeline of there being 3 identical towns, and they're separated by the fact that the middle one is present, The one is like 20 years in the future, and the one to the other side is 20 years in the past. So it's like the same town in 3 different like times all together, and you can travel back and forth between them, but it's very restricted. I think that that's such a cool way of doing the timeline interaction stuff, but it just never really ended up hitting the highest of highs. And unfortunately, I didn't think the characters were all that great. Even though I could relate to them on some level, I didn't think that the characters were amazing, and the dialogue didn't sell me on the story. I would love to see what he does next, and I have high hopes for this author. And I think that if you're a time travel fan, you should read it for sure. For sure. Monet says, Jimmy, did you like a high better or Demon Copper? Demon Copperhead. Demon Copperhead is an all-timer. Book of the New Sun, not S tier. Literally, it is in S tier. Sword of the Lictor is right there, bud. Meowcat said, definitely read the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. It was so good to me. It wasn't the best, but dang, I had so much fun reading it. Yeah, I think Turton's going to be an author that I just read when I need a good time, you know? And not to say that he's not saying some cool stuff in there and like deep thematically. He's not thematically sound. He is. He has some good stuff in there, but I don't know. I read it and just had a great time and wanted to tell people about it. I've recommended it to a couple people and they've enjoyed it too, which is cool. In Ascension, shortlisted for the Booker Prize. This is a first contact sci-fi. It is a big mix of like literary fiction and sci-fi. I think it will displease both fans. And I really, really like this book. And I'm going to put it in the A tier. It's about an oceanographer. Somehow ends up with the first contact story. I think a little bit of it feels like a reach, but I think the way that it talks about family and relationship, and again, of course, what does it be to human? It works really, really well. This is very dry for a lot of people, but I found that the main character's story was very touching, and I like the sci-fi elements of it. It is not an all-time favorite sci-fi, but it was definitely among the elites this year that I read for sci-fi. So I hope that you'll give it a check it out if you're somehow in between like literary fiction and sci-fi. I think it'll displease most people. The Familiars by Benjamin Lyer. This is a book I was really excited about reading. I got a big push from DAW. Tab Williams liked it. And this is a book kind of post-apocalyptic, but the whole world is inside of like this mountain, and there is a monster like buried in the barrows underneath that could end the world. And it turns out that someone is trying to get there. And there's like these forever old people who are trying to interact. And then there's 2 people that they're called behemoths, but I think they're from our world, and they like jump in, and it's very confusing about what's going on. And I thought that this book was really, really good. I love the world building so much. And I love meeting the characters where they were post this, like, you know, almost apocalyptic event that happens. The world building is insane. I mean, there's so much to this. This is the closest thing I found to Dark Tower by Stephen King. It's not a 1-for-1, but it's in the realm. My only problem is that I found a lot of the dialogue cringy. There's a lot of like saying fuck for fuck's sake. And not that I mind. I mean, I'm totally cool with swearing, but it felt like it's edgy. It's edgy. And it's just a little too much edge for me. There's also a really unbelievable group of people who are supposed to be super tight, but like don't know anything about each other's past. And I just never bought into it. But man, I will read this sequel when it drops. There's no doubt about it. So like, it's going in the C tier because like, admittedly, the premise is carrying a lot of this book. I don't think that Benjamin Lyer is a bad writer, also phenomenal author name. I actually think he chose a style and ran with it. It's just a style that I'm not necessarily super into. But I will read the rest of this series. I think it's a trilogy. I don't really know, but I will definitely read it. This world building is a bit daring. It's a bit unique, and I like seeing someone go for it. He quotes a ton of different inspirations for this. Louis McMaster Bujold, The Other Land by Tad Williams, and The Dark Tower, of course, by Stephen King, and he has some other stuff. So I would definitely recommend The Failures if you don't mind a little bit of edginess to your stories. Jack said, do you have kids? Is Ohio still a Gen Alpha meme? I have no idea. I don't have kids, and I don't really. Beltu said, you had me at displeasing fans. This book displeases everyone. I loved it. Jimmy about every book he likes. Tyson said, The Failures is my favorite book that came out in 2024. I could see it, dude. Like, if you're okay with like the little bit of the edgier stuff, like it absolutely is unique and stands out in a bunch of new releases that all feel very similar. Kyra says, how funny would it be if you gave When in Truth D tier? You could use that as clickbait for the thumbnail showing up ranked in D tier. My last wrap up, I featured When in Truth in the thumbnail and then immediately regretted it because I had people who don't usually watch the channel coming in, which is usually what you want for a YouTube channel. That's not really what I do. I'm just having fun. And, I just got a bunch of dumb people that were upset about, dudes kissing that need to touch grass. And I was like, man, that thumbnail was really good as far as like YouTube getting people to click, but man, I wish I wouldn't have done it. Between Two Dragons and Their Wrath by Devin Madsen. This is like a pseudo epic fantasy romantasy. That had some cool stuff in it, but overall was not the best. There was only, I think, one character I liked in this book. My friend Joe, who I love dearly, loves Devin Madsen's other series. And we were both excited about it. And we both actually came out pretty mid on it. I don't think I'll continue this, but it's up in the air, I would say, if I will. Dev Madsen's other series, I might return back to her other series, actually. We'll see. Jared Henderson, this book, S tier masterpiece. Everyone will hate it. You people in the chat might like some D tier material. What? Gotta grow that channel. We don't. We really don't. Kev says, I love dudes kissing. Me too, brother. Me too. The Devin Madsen book was a bit disappointing. Yeah, I was really excited. I really like the way Devin Madsen does character voices, and I think that the world building is actually pretty interesting. But when I finished the book, I think what I said was, I just want more. Like, I wish that I think the book is like 450 pages, and it's like one of those times where I'm like, I would really prefer someone like to go just a little bit deeper, Whereas, like, for instance, Benjamin Lyre's release this year, very much willing to go into the world building and to do something crazy. And I thought it was excellent. So Jack says, you're mid. Fair enough. Fair enough. Marty, hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah. When in Truth, final two ones. Probably the two most popular books on the list, right? Little Life's pretty popular. Okay. I'll do Stephen King's You Like It Darker first. I thought this was super awesome. Super solid for King. I think it proves that he still got it. Rattlesnakes was an absolute slammer. There were some other ones in there that I thought were great. I had a great time reading You Like It Darker. There might only been 2 or 3 stories in there that I didn't love. Did get a little bit repetitive though, and King just loves an interrogation. My God, he's got to move on from it, dude. It's like it's that, and apparently Holly. I've never read a Holly book, but apparently he just loves Holly to death, and he loves a wrongfully interrogated person. It's like his favorite thing in the freaking world, a wrongly accused person, and it's just I've had enough of it. So like that hurt the collection overall, but man, some of the stuff in there that was good was really, 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 really good. Time for the one that will make absolutely no one mad and that the internet will be very calm about. Your mom is mid. That's very rude. She watches the channel. When in Truth was trashed on YouTube and yet made like 100x more money than Navigator's Children. We live in an unjust world. Well, to be fair, it got trashed on YouTube, but it has very high ratings overall. I think the last time I looked, it was like a 4.6. So, and also there's a performative aspect of YouTube that you always have to consider as well, one way or the other. So, Kyra says, plenty of room for When in Truth. It's a big book. You Like It Darker Tower? Pretty good. All right, guys. Rattlesnakes is an all-timer. I did not intend When in Truth to be the final one, but actually I'm kind of glad because like people just give up on my ramblings at this point, like the people who I don't really want commenting on my videos. So that's cool. When in Truth, my expectations were perfect. I'm a 40% hit rate with Brandon Sanderson. He's not, look, he has 2 books in D tier. When in Truth was predictable for me. Day 1, I hated. Day 2 was fine. Day 3 on, I had a pretty good time. There was moments that hit really, really high highs while also disliking so much of the way Sanderson writes. But that's nothing new, and I'm kind of beating a dead drum here. But at the end of the day, I was pretty happy I read it. And I also loved reading with my friend Christian. And we run Lost and Roshart together, and he's been, in my opinion, he's the best Stormlight channel there is on YouTube. I don't think it's relatively close. If you like Alt-Shift-X for A Song of Ice and Fire, you should check out Lost in Discovery. He's the GOAT. and just having that experience with reading the book, clearly flawed, but also clearly epic at times. And I did like pretty much every endpoint, even though Sanderson like always seems to back off of some of the coolest stuff he does. He always has to like kind of peel it back a little bit. Like he can't, we're adults, dude. Like you can take the gloves off at times. But yeah, it's all my own personal subjective opinion. I think that this book is just a really solid B tier. And I know that that is the fence sitting piece of me. I'm trying to think. You know what? There's books in C tier that I liked more than Wind and Truth. But it's really close. It's really, really close. The problem is like, so if I'm being, you know what, I think it has to go C tier, and I'm going to tell you why. Because if I wasn't invested and also like very much interested in what happened next, this is the thing. After day one, I would have DNF'd this book. And I didn't because I needed to know what happened next because I'm invested in it. Not emotionally, but invested in curiosity wise. But I can't pretend like there wasn't pieces of the book that absolutely were like terrible for me. I still think that he did a pretty good ending, though. I thought the ending was actually a little bit rushed. I talked about Navigator's Children and how Tad let things breathe at the end, and I thought it was a relief. I wouldn't even needed that big of a falling action from Sando. I would have just liked a little bit more, to be honest with you. So I would say this is really high C tier, B tier on some days. Like the experience of reading it and having fun and getting it a day early, I found that at Target is like all B tier experience. But like if I'm judging it as I judge every other book that isn't as hyped, right? Isn't a this year release for most of these things, and I just judge it as a book, it's a C tier book. I don't believe it's D tier. I mean, there are people who are pretending Wind and Truth like beat their dog, and that they have to go John Wick, and that's fine. You guys can have whatever experience you want. I've read so many books that are worse than Wind and Truth. It's not even funny. Like, I'm very middle of the road on it. It's probably my third favorite in the series. Maybe, I don't know. It's definitely like Words of Radiance or Oathbringer, like 1 and 2. Probably Way of Kings, Wind and Truth, Rhythm of War, but also like Way of Kings on a reread wasn't as good as it was when I first experienced it, and I thought it was just magical. Grown a lot since then. I've read a lot of stuff. But yeah, Sanderson's not very fun to talk about anymore either. It kind of sucks. Like, just like the water gets really muddied with people who I think are just not worth the time to talk to. I'm not saying people who just like, didn't like the book. I'm talking about like a very certain type of person. So it's just become like really not fun. And it's so weird, like how much fun I had reading it, like with my friend Christian, to how unfun it was to talk about it after, which is like one of the problems of, it's like one of the problems of like reading on the internet. Right. So, but I also, wow, people are going ham. Okay. I tried not to look at the chat because I didn't want to be swayed by anybody. Okay, let's go through all these. I hope no one's spoiling Wind and Truth in the chat. If you are, you're going to get banned. I'm just letting you know, like, straight up, I will ban you. I don't care how long you've been here. Do not spoil the book in chat. I should have probably said that prior, but... There's some people saying Stephen King might not have it. Okay, some people said C tier, some people said B tier. You mean the internet is not real life? It might be closer than it's ever been before, and I don't think that's a positive thing. People feel like they have to like Sanderson. Matt, I couldn't disagree more. Literally, my entire feed is just full of people absolutely hating on this book. This is like one of those weird things where I see people saying like, I'm going to be brave and say that I don't like Sanderson. And I'm like, it's just, and I'm not saying they're not right. That's what they're seeing, but like, it is so dependent on whatever, you're being served. I have seen literally nothing but hate for Wind and Truth. I think I've seen one positive review for it. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but I'm just saying from my perspective, it's been nothing but vitriol towards it, which sucks. Doug said, I'm not sure how lots of people liking something you don't is unjust. I don't know if you're talking to me, but I don't think anything about that is unjust. I didn't say that. I don't think. Seth Plato said, my subscription is depending on this no pressure. The Kremlin hive mind. Unsub. B tier surprise. Boo, boo. Okay. Oh man, I probably was playing with you guys' emotions this whole time then, because I quit YouTube over this. My God. My God. Paint the room red with my brains. That's a really good callback to a past Chatting with Nuts episode. I love that. Let the hate flow through you. There's hate for some of it, man. How much do you hate day one? I really hated day one, to be honest. I deleted my channel over this and then you changed it. Get rug pulled, idiot. Meowcat says, our faith has been restored, Jimmy. I'm still in day 4. You read 400 bad pages and you're still like, yeah, not too shabby. I mean, it's only a small fraction of the book, Jared. It's only a small fraction of the book. And I really, really like some of the part. When in Truth was woke trash for me. I promise you this is not the channel for you, dude. I'm not doing this culture war bullshit, dude. You're gone. Not a chance. All right. So what are there any actual things in here? When in Truth killed my auntie. That's so unfortunate. Do you think he'll recover from this or will Stormlight continue the downward trajectory? If you mean, will he downward trajectory is in like very highly rated across a lot of different websites that aren't this small niche of booktube and he's selling millions of copies, I think he'll be just fine, man. I think he'll be just fine. You're saying it's one of the worst books you read this year. I am not saying that at all. And worst is relative. So it's all good. Relax. I hated The Final Empire and YouTube loves it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no coming back from this, Jimmy. I know. It's terrible, isn't it? Jack says, everything I do not like is woke. Yes, that is what it seems to be, my friend. Jimmy, listen to me. The chat is in anarchy and it's not my fault. It is absolutely your fault. I thought it was very confusing, but it was my first Sanderson book and didn't realize it was book 5 until I finished. The most based review I've ever read of Brandon Sanderson. Fantastic. Was it one of the 10 worst books you read in 2024? See, this is the problem, is like everything has to be a value statement on the internet of like worst, best, great, terrible. And I just like of all of these books, the only ones that I wish I had not read are Little Life and Shadows of Self, I would say. Changeling is probably, it's just a me thing, probably. But like, I don't have to make a value statement on everything. It's all just a spectrum of enjoyment, I think. And for me, there was not a whole lot of hate this year. Like I did not hate read anything this year, really. Maybe a Little Life towards the end, but Kyra says, When in Truth is a really great book. It just needs to work on its plot, pace, and character development, world building, parts. Okay, yep. All right. I find this stuff exhausting. Exhausting. It's like, dude, okay. And I'm not coming at you, Kyra, by the way, but like, dude, Sanderson's been writing, like I did think that his writing was worse in this book than prior. I thought it was on page with the Secret Projects, which I didn't enjoy very much. But it's like, I feel like this was the first Sanderson that let a bunch of people down, and I've just been let down so many times before him that it's not surprising to me. Like I said, my expectations were appropriate for the book, and it landed that way. So. Oh, it's all good, Doug. He said, sorry, Jimmy, that was a response to somebody else earlier. No, I just want to make sure I didn't misspeak. Or I had misspoken. So, don't worry. Jared said, my disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined. It's like watching only the first episode of One Piece and saying it's mid. Hey, you never know. It felt like Sanderson's writing was very juvenile, almost middle grade level compared to his previous books. I think that I would agree that when I read Brandon Sanderson, and it's not just this book, but when I read Brandon Sanderson, I generally feel like I am not being trusted very much. Personally. Gavin says, all roads lead to Murphy. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jared said, I say this with no exaggeration. I am baffled and I will go to bed mad about this. Kyra says, how about you piss off both the B tier Win and Truth fans and the C tier Win and Truth fans and place it in D tier? A true compromise. I don't know if that's a true compromise, but it would be fun for the clicks, I would imagine. I think your discussion of Win and Truth, both publicly and privately, have been the most interesting and measured I've come across. Never changed, my friend. Well, thank you. I get. I just, I don't know. I don't know how anybody else really has felt about Sanderson at this point, but like it was just more of the same for me. And there's some of it I really like, and there's some of it I really dislike. And if you guys have ever doubt, I can share screenshots when Alan's like, how's it going? And I'm like, man, I just read some of the stuff I love the most about fantasy and also some of the things I hate the most about fantasy. Like it's always just a mixed bag. Also, like if you read 5 books from almost any author, you better damn well have some ups and downs, right? Now, would I say Sanderson as an author has been more downs for me? Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. He's not one of my favorite authors. He wouldn't make a top 50. I mean, let's not get it twisted. I just feel like it's like it's like if the Browns have a losing season next year and then people are like, man, the Browns did what the Browns always do. It's like, well, yeah, they always do. And Sanderson's going to keep selling and he's going to keep being popular. Will he be the darling of fantasy forever? Probably not. But also, probably so. I would bet against the guy. Fantasy Fanatic says, the hate is way overblown to me. It's exhausting, quite frankly. Yeah, and there's a lot of people in there that are trying to hijack the conversation for their own, like, you know, personal reasons and in this whole, like, culture war thing that I think is complete and utter nonsense and garbage. But that's just me. Rodrigo said, you ruined my night, Jimmy. I haven't read any book of the Stormlight Archive. I really wish I would have put this in the middle because I didn't want this to end this way. This is not how this was supposed to go. Mrs. Nutt said, I would be terrible at tier ranking books I read, living on vibes over here. Yeah. I get it. I totally get it. It was a great year, man. So S tier, you know, these books that I love the most, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, The Book Thief, The Navigator's Children by Tad Williams, Cloud Atlas, Into the Narrow Dark by Tad Williams, Claire and the Sun, Remains of the Day, My Dark Vanessa, and Sword of the Lictor. I'm very happy with this list, I think. There's stuff that can be moved up and down. You know, there's stuff that's razor thin. But at the end of the day, all I want is for people to read more books and talk about them in a reasonable fashion, and also to explain, you know, why they love reading so much or hated reading something so much. Can also be kind of interesting. So I hope that you guys also had a good year of reading in 2024. For me personally, I'm glad that it's kind of over. Like I'm glad to move on from this. In 2025, I have a couple different ideas, but a lot of it is going to be trying to complete some of the series that I have started, but it's not going to be like the only thing I'm doing. I'm really looking into standalones, a lot of standalones. Well, hopefully fixating on some series at once. I'm even doing a pretty good job of it right now. And I've definitely been getting a lot of the Gene Wolfe itch lately, so I'd like to do something with that, maybe relatively soon. Murphy says, if it helps, I think most of the chat is memeing. This has been a fun stream, Jimmy. Thank you for hanging with us. Of course. Yeah, and I know it's all good fun for the most part. I hope that people... Oh, no, wait. Someone said... Amanda said, I'm going to go finish Kushiel Scion after this. A true S tier series, no matter what Jimmy says about Norse. I hope the Norse aren't still there. Oh, my God. Doug says that me and his tastes are very opposite, it seems, but he's always happy to hear my reviews. That's what it's all about, man. That's what it's all about. And thank you. I appreciate that. I never asked for you guys to all agree with me ever. But I really, really do hope that many people find books that they maybe want to add or avoid. You could always find books that you want to avoid. It's not always about the taste matching up. And I hope that I never come across as I'm using an objective tone, because I don't know anything at all. Thanks for being here. We're wrapping up this year. We're jumping to the next. 2 weeks we'll be wrapping up January's reads in a nutshell, and then maybe some changes to the formats coming, but the lives are going to continue. We're going to continue rolling. We're going to continue reading. We're going to continue discovering. We're going to continue growing together. And we're going to have a good 2025 by any means necessary. If you like this video, you can, of course, hit like. And if you dislike it, you can hit dislike. If you love to think about subscribing, I love to have you here for the live shows or after the fact. And if you're watching after the fact, leave some comments. Let me know what you read in 2024. What's in your S tier? What's in your D tier? Tell me how dumb I really am. I would love that. Not really. There's Patreon description. It's optional, but always appreciated. Until we see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.